Good evening, and welcome to our Redistricting Committee meeting. Tonight we're being televised live, as well as will be live streamed for people who would like to watch us at home, as well as outside of Longmeadow. For people that are new to our system, you are on live microphones. If you would like to speak to someone and not be heard, you press the push button, and that way your comments will not go over the TV station, okay? So at this time, I'd like to review the agenda for the evening. We will be following Robert's rules, so I'd like to remind everybody to please raise your hand to be recognized. We have a much larger group, and I'd like to run it a little bit more formally tonight than we have in the past. So at this point, I'd like to start with welcome to our new members and have everybody go around, introduce yourselves, and please tell us what your role is on the committee. I am Marie Doyle, the superintendent.
Janet Robinson, School Committee Chair.
Jenna Papadopoulos, impacted parent.
Armin Ray, impacted parent.
Rachel Axton, School Counsel for Center School.
Julia Longo, Center School Teacher Representative.
Donna Hutton, Principal, Center School.
Marie Pratt, Principal Blueberry.
Carrie Greenman, impacted parent.
Michael Richard, impacted parent.
Sue Bertrand, Assistant Superintendent for Learning.
Mark Oldenburg, Director of Pupil Services.
Alex Mitreski, impacted parent.
Tom Manella, Blueberry Hill School Council Representative.
Sherry Ehrenberg, Blueberry Hill PTO.
Carolyn Santiago, Blueberry Hill PTO. Katie Gerard, School Committee.
Deb Diana, impacted parent.
Elizabeth Therian, Center School PTO President.
Great. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. This is a very important committee. I know that it's been a very emotional time for the community of Longmeadow. I'm hoping that we can put our best minds together and somehow bring the community back together. This is a community that loves our children. We want what is best for every single one of them, but we're faced with a very important issue, and I appreciate having everyone here with us tonight. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes, so at this point I would like to open it up for any feedback on the minutes.
Yes.
Marie?
On page 3, down at the bottom,
Yes.
you see by my name. Over the last 3 years, the average has been about 20.
Okay.
Over my 12-year tenure has been, the average has been about 14 to 15 on average.
So on
And
average,
the largest, so the smallest number was 9, and the largest I've ever had, it was 23 new first graders.
23, okay. And that gained on the average of 20 first graders every year?
Over the last 3 years, I would say over the 12 years has been 14 to 15.
Okay.
Alice?
I haven't had a chance to review the minutes. When were they posted?
I believe they're
Last, what was,
What is the draft
Wednesday,
minutes that we talked
Thursday?
about? Okay, all right, yeah.
Michelle?
On page 1, the last line, it says the vote passed, therefore the agenda will continue as presented. Was it did not pass, or is that like a reverse of the?
The vote failed to pass.
the vote, okay, so the vote failed to pass. I'm sorry.
Okay, on page 4. One, two, three, fourth paragraph.
Uh-huh.
If you could strike propose to identify.
Did identify neighbor A and,
Yeah, A initially.
okay.
And at the first enrollment meeting.
I'm sorry, and what?
If you say, change it to, she did not identify,
She did identify neighborhood A initially.
at the first enrollment meeting.
Okay.
And then, sorry, I have this written easily. Next to the sentence that says, she shared enrollment numbers back to 1985-86, which appear to reflect a movement of the problem, not a fix of the problem. You know, if you could just say what the enrollment numbers reflected to me. So if you say,
Appear to shift the problem rather than what?
okay, Okay,
Michelle?
If you just continue that sentence.
Right, she shared enrollment numbers back to
which appear to reflect a movement of the problem, not a fix of the problem.
Okay.
On page 5 at the bottom, I didn't commented that staffing and class placements could be done in June if someone else did, but I knew I would have known that, so if you could strike Michelle.
Okay.
On page 7,
Mm-hmm.
if you could add to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, the 4th paragraph that starts with Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
It says, Michelle likes proposal E. You could say, only got it, but only got it just now and needs time to absorb as with other proposals. And then, if you could just add that. And then a continuation of what we'd like to have feedback from the community.
Mm-hmm.
Page 8. In that first paragraph that's very long, about halfway down, where it says, Michelle suggested the option of modular classrooms. Could you strike classrooms and write space? Because I said not necessarily for use as classrooms.
Okay.
Thank you. The next paragraph down, Michelle suggested that the committee stop the discussion regarding grandfathering. I don't think I said that. I don't know if that happened, but I definitely wouldn't stop the discussion on grandfathering.
So you want that whole sentence stricken?
Sure, or my name somehow, but I don't think that was me.
Okay.
Somewhere in that last paragraph, if you could add, Michelle spoke to the point that many people are eager to speak, as they have only been allowed to email as of yet.
Okay.
And that is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other feedback on the minutes? Alex?
In the very beginning, first page, third paragraph, when it says Alex is concerned, I think it should be Alex was concerned about the composition of the committee, but feels that Marie should be on the committee because that's what it was in 2002. I think that was the statement that I made. That it's.
So what would you like that sentence to say?
Alex was concerned about the composition of the committee, but sees no problem with Marie serving, being a voting member, because that's how it was in 2002. And then there is no need for a vote.
Okay.
I'm trying to find in the minutes statement that Tom made of how Plan E was derived, which was a seed from a person who had come up. Was that captured anywhere? Because I remember Tom speaking and saying Plan E came out as a seed from somebody who's in the
On
audience.
page 2, the last paragraph says buffer zone swing area proposal. Alex spoke to this proposal as it was not discussed at the previous meeting. Is that where you were thinking, or no?
At some point when Tom spoke, and he said I forget at which point it was, but he said Plan E came out as a seed from somebody else who came up with a proposal, and then the data subcommittee had looked at it, but we had never sort of fully developed it as a proposal. So what I did was I just ran the numbers how we could work. All right, let's search for seed.
I brought up E at a data subcommittee meeting. So in a casual conversation with somebody, a resident of the town, a non-impacted parent.
But I don't know where that was discussed in the meeting the last time. So if you could refer me to the section of the minutes.
I think Janet, if I'm looking correctly, I think it was on page 3. And there's like there's a really big paragraph.
Right.
We had back and forth. I think it belongs in that portion of the meeting, but I'm trying to figure out where. And I don't remember exactly. where? Does that help, Alex, if you go to page 3 there?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere in that discussion.
Tom mentioned that having neighborhoods where some children, is that somewhere, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think anywhere would be captured.
So
It's
what would
just-
you like added in that paragraph?
Tom stated that neighborhood E was a proposal that came out from a non-impacted parent.
So I'll clarify. I had a casual conversation with a parent who wasn't impacted by A or C, and an idea of swing areas was kind of mentioned, and I developed that germ of an idea into a full-fledged proposal and crafted maps based on it. And that's the proposal that I brought to the data subcommittee. And we later deemed that E.
Okay.
Janet is set to catch up with the writing, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Any other feedback on the minutes? Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
As amended.
As amended. Michelle, second? Okay, thank you, Mark. All in favor?
Is,
Oh, wait, can I do that?
Mark's not a voting
Sorry,
member.
can't.
Oh, sorry, you
Oh,
can't do
sorry.
that.
Katie?
Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended? All those opposed? Okay, it's unanimous.
Ready for the abstention.
I need to,
Oh,
I need
and
to
those
abstain.
abstain. Thank you very much. Abstaining. A question rose about open meeting law and whether or not this body was subject to the law. The law is very explicit for publicly elected officials and those representing the public, such as school committee and select board members. This one was confusing, so I called legal for a couple of reasons. The body I assigned, and you report to me to make a recommendation to school committee, but the law is a little vague because it's going to school committee, is it a recommendation or not? But the legal counsel said that it's a recommendation to me, therefore we are not subject to open meeting law. But the two lawyers in the room also said there's no guarantee that the Attorney General will read it that way. So I think the confusion was well warranted. I think that I would say we're not under the bound of open meeting law. Based on that, I think if we were under the open meeting law, Tom's right, it would have to be a quorum, which would be, how many people did we figure?
9.
9 people would have
9.
to be meeting at one time. So, but that's the reading from our legal team. So I'm going to operate under the assumption this is an advisory committee to me, that I am making the recommendation to school committee, so we are not bound by open meeting law. Any questions on that? Okay. Next, Tom and it came up during the forum, as well as Tom had asked to see the data and things that we had done. So what I did is I put together a timeline and all the documents that we looked over the past several months, and thought it would be helpful for you to see some of the work that was done before the committee assembled. In October, the enrollment committee had a primary meeting where we met and identified necessary tasks to be done. There were things that we needed, like enrollment from NESDEC. NESDEC is a council that does over 250 school districts' enrollment projections. And if you look online, I had those posted today. It's a pretty hefty document that goes through everything, district-wide enrollment. It shows you past trends, upcoming trends. We also then took data of where students lived. We looked at our database internally, and we pinned where kids lived in certain neighborhoods to get counts from where they were going. Yes.
Stop for 1 second. Go back to open meeting law, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I think the clear message we heard the other night was around transparency from everybody. And I don't think it does the public any good for any members of this committee to debate in an email stream where the public will not have access to those comments. So even though we may not be subject to the open meeting law, I think it would be very appropriate for transparency, if that's really what the crowd asked for the other night, that we would at least keep the debate or the email streams public so that people will be able to see them. That's just my thoughts.
Okay.
Sorry.
Other thoughts on that?
I guess I would just have a question, clarifying question. What do you consider debate versus bringing information? So for example, if I come up in an article and say this is something I had seen, so it's more of a fact for consideration, is that a debate, or is that okay to be submitted? So that's...
I would just say from my own experience with the open meeting law and having to, and I would say other people in this room could probably speak to it just as well as I can, I've had going through the training. But if you were to send a document to Diane to say, can I have this entered into the public record, Diane will then distribute that to the entire committee, and therefore there would be no debate around that topic.
Mhm.
And then the public would have the same access to it that we do.
Okay, no, I mean, you're the one who sort of raised this, and I was a little bit caught off guard because I'm not sort of experienced with this, so I mean, it's a good point.
I think, Alex, some of the confusion came because I know that there have been a lot of subgroups meeting, and if we were members of school committee and we did that, and had a quorum, we would be out of compliance with the law. This law was made in, I think, 2009, so that people know what was going on when you have a large working group. This is a large committee. I do appreciate, Armand, I think the more transparent we are, the better for everybody. And when we're having smaller meetings and people aren't aware of what's going on at those meetings, we're all not having an equal voice. I think with the open meeting law, the idea was to have everything said publicly, debated publicly, so everyone knows where we stand, where we're headed, and how we got to a decision. So.
Agreed. That's what I've been asking for these committees to be televised, all of them.
Yep. Tom?
I'd like to echo,
Ju-
sorry.
Just for clarification, the enrollment subcommittee, that's a subcommittee of the school committee?
Subcommittee of the school committee.
And there was 4 members. Were there 4 members?
I'm the superintendent, and there were 3 school committee members.
Okay.
So it's a subcommittee of the school committee.
So a quorum there would be a simple majority? Is a quorum always a simple majority?
It's a simple majority. No, the quorum is one more than half the group is a quorum.
Right. So then, if the enrollment subcommittee was meeting short a member, was that a compliant meeting?
It was, because 2 out of 3 is the majority. So they have enough to meet.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they do. The minutes from the meeting that I'm alluding to now were posted. I think I asked my assistant to post them yesterday. I checked today, so hopefully they're online, because I know you're asking for those
Yep.
as well, Tom.
I saw them right before I came here. They were.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, anything else on open meeting law? Michelle?
So I would just like to echo, Armin, I think ethically, whether or not it's by law, but I think that's I would support just keeping conversation on public record and transparent, so.
Yeah. And it's a tough question, because I am going to report what you say back to the school committee, but it's just that technicality that is my group, so I appreciate people's willingness to be as transparent as possible. All right, I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda, the timeline. So the group originally met in October to see what we needed to do and how to get going. We looked at the enrollment data from NESDAQ, and then we talked about where students were clustered in neighborhoods. And it goes back to those priorities that we talked about during our meeting, where there were neighborhood boundaries, how many students lived in a particular neighborhood, what would be the easiest transition from one school to another. We identified space issues at schools. We needed to analyze where residents new to Longmeadow are moving, because part of the dialogue that had come from the principals is that we were seeing an increase in enrollment, particularly in the first grade. And then we also ordered large maps so that we could actually pin. We pinned 3 neighborhoods, and we did that by grade and by neighborhood, so that we could see where clusters of students were in order to balance the schools. Once the enrollment committee met, I then took over in terms of coordinating work. The people who did the work were the administrators, various administrators, that included central office, the principals, and I, and one school committee member, which was Janet, who helped with the pinning and collecting of data and making charts. When November came, we analyzed the data from NESDAQ.
Can I interrupt you there for a minute? Was that only just one meeting? And if, to the extent that it's possible, could you identify how many meetings and who were the individuals in those meetings?
There was one official meeting of the enrollment committee, and then it became all a working group after that, which was primarily internally done by administration.
Okay, so there was 3 people from the school committee that you've identified, and only 2 attended that first meeting, right?
Right.
And you, so that was just the 3 of you, one meeting in October, okay.
Right.
In the November meetings, was that 1 or 2 people? Was it 5 people sort of in a group? I guess the only thing that I couldn't grasp from this is this 15 minutes, one individual doing something? Is it 3 hours or 5 meetings during the span of a month?
It's hours, because as I walk through this, I'm giving you an overview, and then I'm going to walk through each piece of it. Some of it was hours, some of it was weeks to get maps back when we ordered them from the company. Some of it was looking at the NESDEC enrollment and then realizing we didn't have individual elementary school data, so we had to send back to the company. That took a month to turn over. So there were things like that that slowed the process down. But at that point, the ball was in my court in terms of following up with what the enrollment committee had guided me on doing to get the next steps done.
Okay. And one more clarifying question. Did the public knew that all of this was happening?
I announced that at kindergarten forums previously. We announced at the school committee that an enrollment subcommittee was being set up. So it had been discussed publicly on numerous occasions.
Was the word redistricting being mentioned publicly?
Yes. It had been mentioned many times publicly. Okay. So at this point, again, I'll give you, Jenna?
Can I just ask one more quick question on that? So, and I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you had posted the minutes. I know Tom said that he saw the minutes. The minutes that you had posted, were they just from that first enrollment committee
Just from the
meeting?
first meeting.
First meeting.
And then with the slides, I'll walk through everything else that's been done in the meantime before this group convened. Okay? Armand? No? Okay.
Trying to get the picture for you.
Okay. All right. So with the enrollment data from the company that specializes in this, we realized we did not have projected enrollment for the elementary schools for the next 5 to 10 years. As I've discussed with the committee previously, we know from the cohort survival ratio that school data is good for 5 years. When it gets to 5 to 10 years, it's not as solid as you would like. So we have it done annually, so we're always watching the numbers, but I wanted the company to give us 5 years so that we could see what the trends were. So we sent for that and had that done. We looked at neighborhood and numbers of students. Again, began to pin those. I'll show you those areas in a few minutes. We reviewed space needs at each of the elementary schools. We identified what programs would be housed at each elementary school. That included ELL, the preschool, and special education programs. That work was done with central office. There were follow-up meetings later with the principals to discuss exactly what space needs were. And before we could even begin a true study of redistricting, we needed to know what programs were housed and what we needed to, spaces we needed to claim for the programs we had internally. In December, we received and updated the enrollment information. The administrative team and Janet mapped and pinned where students resided in town. We examined three neighborhoods in particular. We realized that we had a certain number of students that we needed to take out of Blueberry to place into Center School because it was determined that the preschool was definitely going to Wolf Swamp. I mentioned this earlier, but for our new members, I'll reiterate this. The preschool has speech therapists, occupational therapists, and other providers that work at Wolf Swamp as well as at the preschool. So we've been having them go back and forth. On top of that, many of our students in the preschool at a special education feed into the programs that are at Wolf Swamp. It was an administrative recommendation last year, and it came from the preschool that it would be better to have the preschool located at Wolf Swamp. It would mean we'd have staff traveling less time, we could maximize their time with students, and it would be better for the students, particularly those that are autistic and don't do well transitions, to go from preschool to a program at Wolf Swamp. So that was a driving factor in this as well. We looked at the previous data from the redistricting committee to see what had been done with Superintendent McGarry and the committee that he set up. And we identified Proposal A as fitting the criteria as identified by the enrollment committee. When you ask what I mean by that, it was a neighborhood that was set up by boundaries. It didn't require busing. It was as close to Center School as Blueberry. It had the correct number of students to make one neighborhood move rather than breaking up several neighborhoods. So at that time, that became a central, in my mind, a central neighborhood to look at. In January, we looked at the enrollment data again for neighborhood A to see if it was accurate. We reviewed the staffing needs based on redistricting. We developed budget plans based on redistricting in 2015 and 16. In February, we expanded the number of students in streets to balance enrollment in schools in Proposal A. There still were not enough students when we began looking at class sizes. They were not balanced. So with that data, we realized we needed even more students to transition to Center School if we were going to have balanced class sizes at Center and Blueberry and Wolf Swamp. We then also sent sent out a letter to the community, invited community members to sit on our committee. Alex, I do apologize. I did ask you at the last minute, but it was on that day that someone from your neighborhood resigned from the committee. When I came into the meeting and saw you there, you had also sent an email volunteering to sit on the committee. Everyone else was notified in a timely fashion. You were not, and I apologize, but it was due to a last-minute resignation from someone in your neighborhood. And I felt it was better to ask you last minute than not to have your neighborhood represented on the committee.
That's great, thank you.
Mhm.
Can I stop you for 1 second there? So, just trying to understand what sort of was public. So, after, there's notes on the October meeting, but after that and the February 25th email from you, the public or the school committee never sort of discussed
No.
any of these updates.
No.
So that can, like, why, I mean, there was a lot of meetings on the school committee and 3 school committee members that were part of this sort of working group. Why none of that was sort of discussed publicly?
It was my decision not to discuss it because in listening to what had happened last time we did redistricting, and in my experience in Newton, it becomes very upsetting, it became hostile, it became detrimental. I thought if that I could get the legwork done and do it quietly, there'd be less of that extended period of animosity within the community. I made a conscious decision to do that. And as I said at the forum, I'm not sure that was the right decision, but my intentions were to keep this as calm as I could, to do as much legwork as I could. Because if all of this had been done publicly, I think the community would have been this upset since September. I do know in living through it in Newton, because it lasted as long as it did, there were hard feelings that lasted over 5 years. And it took a lot of mending for the community, for the neighborhoods to come together again. So I made a conscious choice to do that. Tom?
I appreciate your forthrightness on that, and you've said that multiple times. I truly do appreciate that. And I do understand what you're saying about sparing the town the stress of this from an earlier date. I guess what I'm troubled by is that you had empaneled an enrollment committee. There was an enrollment committee established for the sole purpose of evaluating enrollment numbers and deciding the need for redistricting. And then without that committee, that analysis was done. I'm curious, why were enrollment studies done outside of the purview of the enrollment committee when an enrollment committee had already been formed?
Because the administration, I needed meetings with central office, I needed meetings with my principals. I had all that information. And those were meetings that were going on during the day for months, where I was collecting information, rechecking that. When it came time to bring the enrollment subcommittee back, it was at that time that I said I was going to expand it to make it a larger committee. So at that time, I chose to bring this group together rather than to bring back just the enrollment data committee. It seemed apparent at that time that it was time to get the community involved, that I had the information I needed to bring forward to you.
Are there any minutes or formal record of the deliberations that occurred among those
Just the work I'm
working
going to
parties?
show you,
Okay.
because internally we work like this on a daily basis, and they're not meetings where we're taking notes. So, but I can show you the work that's been done over the past several months.
Just a little follow-up. So why wasn't the enrollment committee either invited to any of these meetings or even just given an update of what's happening? So you had 3 individuals on that committee. How many of those 3 were sort of in the loop of what was happening?
Janet was asked, volunteered to help with the tracking of where students lived in neighborhoods, but it's very typical for school committee to give assignments and for administration to do it. That's very typical that we actually carry out the work and then report back to school committee.
I thought that's what the assignment was for that committee. Those 3 people was assignment to be overseeing this process.
When we met in October, it was understood that I was going to be looking into all this information.
So did you ever update that subcommittee of the results of this process? Just simple question. Did all of this work, did you ever sit down with this 3?
Not until the full committee met.
Till March 17?
Right.
That's our committee, this committee.
Right. I had conversations with some members, but I did not call back a formal meeting.
Marie?
Janet?
One thing to note is that the enrollment committee members were contacted prior to the letter going out to help edit the letter that was formulated, that was sent to the community February 25th.
And to review the plan.
So that there was a meeting that was attended by both Michelle and I to edit the letter before it went out, and Katie provided her feedback via email to Marie.
And it was at that point that I explained to the subcommittee that I felt it was better to have a large group representative of the community at that point in time.
We didn't have a meeting, right? We did it over email.
No, we met in Marie's office at 1 p.m. on February 21st, before a transportation subcommittee meeting.
Okay, I'll check my calendar. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Tom?
So I took a look at the last school committee meeting that was held, I think just the day before the public forum. And at that meeting, Vice Chair Clark seemed to suggest or say that it was his understanding that the enrollment subcommittee was going to meet in open meeting when considering this information. And it sounds
Originally-
now like that's not what happened. So was
Yeah,
this-
originally, it was not decided to have a large committee like this. Originally, it was a small committee that was going to make the decisions, and that as it became more apparent that this was going to have a major impact, I informed school committee I was going to expand this to a larger committee.
But that realization happened in these small working groups then, not in...
It was a decision I made.
Okay.
If I could just go back. I think that meeting was actually, Marie and I had scheduled that. And I know you were there at one point to draft the letter. I wouldn't have agreed to meet with you in a meeting that we didn't post, because I know that would have been an issue. Because I think we were still under
It
that.
wasn't
So if
necessarily posted as a enrollment subcommittee meeting, but we all were present, with the exception of Katie, to edit the letter.
Right, but that was a meeting with Marie and I. I'll look back on my records, but I wouldn't have scheduled a meeting that we didn't post with you and I. So I know we had some scheduling conflicts. I know I met with Marie in regards to fixing the letter, but I can't confirm that that was a meeting with you, Marie and I. I think it was Marie and I, and at one point Marie Pratt was there so we could just look at some of the changes, but that would have been a violation of open meeting law, and we didn't do that.
I asked for feedback on the letter, but I'm going to move this conversation on. I don't want to get derailed. We've talked about the process many times now. I've apologized that people don't like the process I use, but it is what it is. So at this point, I want to move on to show you the work that was done so you can understand my thinking and so that we can make good decisions as we move forward. So in March, we began the redistricting committee. We developed a cost analysis and budget impact if redistricting was not implemented, because people had said, what happens if you don't do that? There would be changes in the budget. And we researched what out-of-neighborhood students were, because that question had come up many times. So next, this is the first neighborhood we looked at. We thought that was possible, that this neighborhood could be one moved, but there were only 45 students in Turner Park neighborhood. So it also, as we examined it further, it would examine busing, and I believe it had existing busing. So that was taken off the list as a consideration. Another neighborhood looked at was this one. We didn't name it, but there were only 27 students in it. And again, it wasn't enough of a cohort of students to make redistricting feasible. Third, this is what has become known as Proposal A. It was the neighborhood that you're familiar with in Proposal A, and it had 92 students. So it became a boundary of a neighborhood that had a cohort of students that could travel together and still keep the neighborhood intact. The NESDEC enrollment data shows what many of us have talked about, that that the enrollment is dropping, but as you can see, Blueberry still will have a substantially larger population than the other two schools, even 5 years out. The numbers that you're looking at do not include out-of-neighborhood students, and again, the out-of-neighborhood students are school choice, Metco, they're tuitioned in, they're children of staff members, and then their parent requests to have children in the school that do not live in the neighborhood. So that's what we talk about as out-of-neighborhood children. Tom?
So these type of projections are entirely new to me. Very briefly, and not too much time, but could I have some sense of what this firm does in order to come up with those numbers? Do you know what they look at?
It's called the cohort survival ratio. They look at the number of pregnant women that live in a community. They look at the number of houses that might turn over. They look at housing development to see what housing could possibly be built. They look at families that have moved in. So they take all factors like that. They look at the economy to see what's happening statewide in terms of jobs. Is the economy growing? Are we expecting more people to move in? Or is the economy declining? For example, in the last 10 years, the economy was predicted to take a 1% loss, which it did. It impacted housing market, jobs, and school enrollment. enrollment. They're predicting the next 10 years that the economy is going to grow by 1.5%, so that will impact housing and education. So they look at all those factors and they combine them and they have ratios and formulas that they use.
And so it sounds like, am I right, that this is a fairly standard type of analysis that's been done and is used commonly and
Very standard
has some
in education.
reliability? Okay.
This
Yep.
was presented at the forum, and this has been in every presentation.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how these numbers were generated. I just
Yep.
was curious.
They're officially done by a company that specializes in this.
Perfect. Thank
It's a
you so
very
much.
complicated formula, which is why we pay annually to have it
You're
done.
right. Makes
Alex?
sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think Jen was in front of me, but.
Janet?
Just to further answer, in the report itself that's posted, Tom, is they define what parameters they use and how they look at it. So I know the report has just been posted,
Very
but
thorough.
but more definitive of the methodology is in there.
Great. I'll take a look. Thank you.
Alex?
Was this posted before our forum on Tuesday, this data and this?
No, I had my assistant post this today.
So this
I
just,
I
yeah,
have
so
given
3 days
pieces
ago.
of enrollment data, but the report is extremely long, but I thought you'd be interested in seeing it, so I had to post it.
Yeah, and you sent it to me, which maybe a week ago. But I guess my biggest concern with this is a very valuable data that would have been helpful in the first meeting when we meet to understand trends and to understand what has happened so far. The second question I had was, this group didn't look at the neighborhoods and look at sort of the micro view of how that development or how each neighborhood would develop once moved. Meaning, if you move A or Turner Park, are there children going to rise there or the children not? I guess this was just a comprehensive view for the whole district, right?
Right.
Or in regards to the NESDEC data, we used to get it once a year on the school committee. Is it still being provided at the school committee on an annual basis? These are the numbers we use to project to build the high school as well that we gave to MSBA. So I'm guessing you're still paying NESDEC every year and provide this to the school committee in public?
We are.
Okay.
I don't know if we've had it on the agenda this year, but I'll make sure that it's been put on the agenda.
Can you
Deb?
discuss the accuracy of the data? Like it's plus or minus how many students and how they projected, how the projections were off recently and how
Sure.
that's affected what has happened here? Because I don't think a lot of people in the community know and they really would like to know.
The enrollment projections are usually pretty good, but again, the economy and any change, for example, Hasbro closing or reducing employment impacts the community. The enrollment numbers, they update our data every year and then they they plug it into the formula and the work that they do to project it. It's really not too reliable 5 to 10 years out, although they'll give you those numbers. I think last year Longmeadow saw an increase of 77 students, and I think it was grades 2 to 8. And I'll confirm those numbers for you, but there was a surge in enrollment last year. Whether that was the turnaround in the economy, but it was a healthy growth for the town of Longmeadow that was unexpected. So we are seeing that our numbers are rising. Because if you look at the data 2 to 3 years ago, they were still expecting a declining enrollment, and that's not happening. It's remaining fairly stable, a little bit higher.
But on average, how much would you say they would tend to be off on that data each year? Plus or
They're
minus
usually not off.
approximately?
They're usually not.
So
I've
how
worked
far have
with
they been
NASDAQ
off when
as a
this explosion came, well, growth?
I think they're off by about the 77 students. So, but I've followed NASDAQ now for 11 years because when you're doing studies, you're always looking at this. And I went back to see how accurate they were, and they were accurate. So they were accurate to within, I think in my past, when I looked at that, I think they were accurate to within 10 to 15 students. So
Okay.
it was an anomaly to have them off so much last year.
Okay.
Tom?
And am I right in recalling, I think at one of our early meetings, that same boom of growth that was unforeseen, was that disproportionately in Blueberry's territory?
Blueberry had more growth, and I'm going to show you a chart because we went back and looked at that to see exactly where the growth was. So I have that information for you. Alex?
I just wanted to note on page 3 of that report, it starts off saying that over the next 3 years, K-5 enrollment are forecasted to decrease by a total of 92 students due to primarily to fewer births.
Right, and that's what their long-term projection has been, but if you keep reading the report, they'll talk about a healthy surge of 77 students. It's definitely in there, so. Okay, so next we took a look at school space. Marie Pratt helped me with the chart and the principals to develop what were the spaces in the school and what are we looking at. Blueberry has 7 more classrooms, just regular ed classrooms in the other 2 elementary schools. There are 4 special education teachers in the upstairs resource room. There are 3 staff in the reading room. The downstairs resource room has 3 staff in the big room with 1 in the small office. And the ELL teacher shares space with special education teachers. At Center, the teachers currently do not need to share classroom space, and when the preschool moves, they'll have 4 empty classrooms. If you are asked if there are any teachers that do share, there's one time during the day where there's a staff member with 2 children and another staff member with 1 child. It's an extremely large room. They choose to use that room. There are other empty spaces so they would not have to share. Wolf Swamp, the reading teacher and reading coach share a space. The reading coach works primarily with staff. PT and OT share spaces. That's very common because usually they're servicing students at different times during the day. This is the enrollment by grade, Tom, that you were just asking about. If you take a look at this, we went back through grades 1 through 12 to see where the new enrollment was coming in. You can see that it's spread out, but Blueberry has in grade 1 more growth than Center and Wolf Swamp. But I'll give you a minute to look at that so that we are seeing unusual growth. The principals of the elementary schools had pointed out that there was an increase. We have noticed, in particular, there's a phenomenon in Longmeadow where we have a real surge in enrollment in 1st grade. Whether that's due to, we believe, people going to private kindergartens, bringing people back from Montessori, or moving into the district at that time because they realize that the school, it's important. We do see surges at the 1st grade. Okay, Jenna?
So this 77 students that you were just referring to is reflected, buried in these numbers here?
Yes, I believe it's 2 to 8, and I'll check on that for you. But it's in the report. But they're in the elementary through the 8th grade.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is in terms of gross square footage and number of classrooms, are Wolf Swamp Center and Blueberry approximately the same?
Center is a larger building. Wolf Swamp and Blueberry are pretty much identical buildings.
Okay.
They were built the same. Are there any major changes space-wise? I think they're the same. But Center is definitely the larger of the elementary.
Okay. Thank you.
Alex?
Just a point of clarification on page 4, first paragraph, it says that in 2014-2015, the 1,527 children in grades 2 to 8 were a robust 77 more students than 1,440 that were in grades 1 to 7 during the previous year. So I think that's the growth you were discussing. But I just want to go back to the point that they still forecast, 96 decline in enrollment. So I guess this is sort of goes back to the first meeting that I had. Are we sort of catching a high wave and it we're sort of going?
I believe the trend. I know the trend they predict is a drop in enrollment. And if you go back to this, you'll see it's a pretty substantial drop. But again, the economy is turning around, and that's where you don't look at the formula too far out. You look no more than 5 years. That flip in an economy says to me, be careful that the enrollment might just start to level off and go back up again. When they did these and used the data that they had, it was based on a declining economy. They've now turned that around, so I expect to see that we're going to level off, or we might even increase again. Tom?
If this report is done yearly, when is the next one due?
It would be we would get it next fall. But they did update this for us, I believe, in December.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you just made a statement that you think we're going to level or go up, and we hire a professional help that forecast that the enrollment is going to go down. So can you quantify why you think that's the case when we have professionals saying it's going to reduce?
I'm guessing. I probably shouldn't do that. But I do know that what they've done is they keep taking our numbers and they're edging them up each year. So I'll go with the experts, though. I'll defer to the experts.
Thank you.
Okay. But I definitely would use the elementary. This one is the one that I would rely on and use because that was just done in December. That is the most recent thinking. When they did that, they asked for all of our current enrollment, who had enrolled in the fall. This is the latest based on every piece of information they could get from us. Okay?
Which shows about 100 students lower than what we currently enrolled in Blueberry, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Marie, when does it show that as coming to fruition, this 100 students? Is that the 5-year out?
It's 5 years out. So again, it's interesting to watch this. We watch it annually, but looking at those first grades, that's indicative that Longmeadow is an attractive town with many people moving in for education. You've seen the priorities before, but these are the priorities that I kept thinking about when I was looking at neighborhoods and seeing where we could make a transition for redistricting. This, again, internally, we looked at programmatic needs of the district, and I know this has come up in the community, so I would like to address it in a little bit more detail. We have programs that are important for us to have. ELL, we talked about remaining at Blueberry because the students that are in the ELL program are Blueberry students right now. We have a second program that is at Wolf Swamp, but the students are at different levels. It depends whether they're brand new to English or they've been here a while and they just need help with adjustments as they're learning the language. So there are two, but the primary program is housed at Blueberry. The preschool will move to Wolf Swamp, as I explained. We do have 2 LLD classrooms. We have PALS and Link at Wolf Swamp. We have 2 LLC programs that are going to remain at Center. The question that many people have asked, why keep the special needs students in district? Why are we building all these programs? Why are we bringing them home from out of district? And there are lots of reasons. The first is the law says that the least restrictive environment is best for children, and I believe that, as does my team. I believe students receive a better education when we're educating them in our home schools and sending them out of district. It's also great because these students get to know kids within the town. They can form peer groups and friendships. It's also cost effective. Over the past 4 years, by building these programs, we've saved over $750,000. And that $750,000 has gone back to regular education, where we've increased technology, we've hired literacy coaches, we've purchased materials and more. So bringing students home to district is a win-win for all of our children. And I hope that when people are talking about that, they understand that, because I've heard people say, well, they're displacing regular ed classrooms. They're not. They're a vital part of our community, and we love having our special education children in district. Next. Sure.
I agree with you. I think that's a great initiative. Everybody who's been involved in that program raves about that. I think that's great for the children in the community. I guess one note I would have, if we had sort of came up with a plan knowing that that would increase the enrollment, I would have expected us to sort of start the redistricting process sooner so that we can create the space for the children, because that's the right direction to do. Second question I had on the previous slide, I've heard various chatter about ELL program itself, which I understand what it is, and I agree with you, 12 or so students are all enrolled and they're all in Blueberry, so it doesn't make sense to be moved out of Blueberry, but I've heard that it's sort of being reformed and then regular teachers need to be certified for ELL. Can you shine a little bit of light of how is that program going to be administered into the future?
There's a state program where all of our teachers have to take a course that trains them in ELL. Many of them are going through it right now. It's a rigorous course, 67.5 hours, is that right, Sue? Of training where they learn about differentiated instruction, multi-sensory learning, and more. So I think it's a good, rigorous course, but teachers are having problems even getting into the course because everyone in the state is mandated to take it. Marie?
And it doesn't replace the ELL teachers who directly service those students. It's really to help regular ed teachers be able to make them much more a part of the class, use some techniques that would be helpful to them, but not necessarily replace direct service.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
Tom?
Again, K-12 is not my area of expertise, but am I right in understanding or assuming that that type of training would also help those teachers with their more traditional students as well?
Absolutely.
Right.
It gets away from the traditional lecture and reading, and it gets into much more tactile, multi-sensory learning. So it's a benefit to all students, which is why we like it. It's long and it's rigorous, but it's very hard for our teachers to even get in right now. We do have several that have passed, and we have several that are enrolled right now, but it's going to take years for them to get through everyone in the state. Next. When we got to this point with the internal team, we took a look if we moved neighborhood A, or if we moved any of the neighborhoods, would there be staffing implications? We always look at budgeting changes in December, January, because we have to form a budget and give it to the town. This is the chart that we came up with internally. We always do this internally. We work among the team to say where do we need to add positions, where can we save, and where can we put money toward new programs. So this was based upon if neighborhood A was moved. It could be applied to other neighborhoods, because if you're going to make a move in redistricting, we know you need approximately 90 students, and that's why that neighborhood was selected. So if you take a look at the last column, it gives you the grade, the students, the number of students per grade that would be redistricted, what the new class size would be at Blueberry, and I'll show you Center in a minute, the number of teachers that would be needed, the number of students per class, and the plus minus of additions or subtractions of teachers. Alex?
So I guess that's one of the things that I'm looking at, that it's not as apparent here in this table, but it's if you move a teacher, let's say the second grade is 95 students and you move 16, you have 79. So that means that the class size in Blueberry will go up from 19 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other class size, the third graders, I'm not sure if you're gonna, since you're moving 12, if you're gonna keep 4 classes there. If you don't, then the classes will go to 23 instead of 20. And then the last, so my point here is that pretty much all second, third, and fourth grade class sizes will go up in Blueberry. I just want some of the Blueberry parents to understand that redistricting doesn't mean lower average class size.
It doesn't, but these numbers are well within what we use every single year. And when we do staffing every single year, regardless of redistricting, we look at this. We look for numbers around 18 to 22. Sometimes we get lucky and you get down to 16, but also they go on a watch list. So when you get a class that's around 22, and if they're at 23, they're on the list. But when they start getting around 22, the principals are monitoring that. We're always looking at this, and then right before, we usually do it so that August 1st they can hire. We add staff when those classes bubble. So the same type of planning would happen where we're watching them, and if class size will go up, we do that. You're right, it might be a little bit bigger compared to this year, but in terms of how we normally do this and watching them, they're still within the boundaries of what we've used in the past. Marie?
And the reason you see the 2 numbers, and particularly in third grade, is we also then look across the other 2 schools to see if it's comparable to the number. So when you look at, when we see Center's chart, you'll see there will be a couple grades that it could be 3 teachers, it could be 4. So that we could see across as to how that pans out.
And here's Center, so if you look in your packet, you'll have them side by side. Michelle?
Yeah, I just want to compliment you on that, because that's one of the things that I've noticed just in the short time I've been here, that it's non-negotiable. If the class looks at all iffy, Marie always adds staff. So I think kudos to both of you
Thank
on that.
you.
I think it's really important.
We, as an administrative team, really value that. We think in Longmeadow, and we think for really good education, teachers should be able to talk to all of their students each day, and class size is important to us, so.
And with RTI and wind blocks, it seems to me, at least as a parent, that that's becoming even more important.
Absolutely.
That the classes be smaller rather than larger.
Absolutely.
Because we have these small working groups of children that are being individually attended to, or at least that seems to be what's happening.
Yep. The wind block gives us an option to use even more staff to make even smaller class sizes, so we can have very low numbers in the wind block. So, and again, it's because of that bringing students home and saving $750,000 that we're able to build a lot of these programs that are good for all kids. So I'll give you a minute. This is Centers, how it impacts Center, and you can do a comparison side by side. But when I look at the numbers of students per class, we're still within our window. But do you notice how the principals put 23/17? Because it's on our watch list. And to us, 17 is not too low, 23 is too high.
To that point, I think you're gonna have to go one or the other, especially on that third grade, because if you unless you are adding staff, additional teacher, because you're moving 12 from Blueberry, if you don't move that teacher to accommodate and avoid the 23 in the Center to go down to 17, my point is one of the schools will have a drastically higher class size.
Right, and we don't let that happen. That's part of our summer study. As Marie said, if Donna calls up and says, I have 22 that are in the third grade, I'd like another teacher, we then call Marie and Neil and say, okay, what are our numbers? But actually, my assistant keeps the data too. So we have that conversation.
So that means that it will be, to make this work and keep low class, that means one additional staff.
It could
one
be.
additional teacher.
Right.
Well, to make these numbers work, to not go up, you have to have
Yep.
one additional staff.
But Alex,
Okay.
someone can move out, someone can move in. So we're monitoring this again.
Right.
Our cutoff is August 1st so that we can hire. So, and I will tell you, the principals are tenacious about emailing me all spring and all summer. Have you made a decision? Have you made a decision? But I know they need the month to hire, but I also know that we have to wait until we've had almost all the enrollment complete before we can make those decisions.
No, I agree, but I guess where I'm drilling with this point is that I've sort of been under the impression that we're saving 2.7 staff, but this picture points that you need to add 1 staff, so that's where the numbers sort of
Yeah,
don't add up for me.
2.7 regular ed teachers, and I'm going to show you what we did in terms of making budget changes for redistricting that were built in. But again, we'd have to look, we'd have to plan, but if redistricting didn't go through, we can make changes. We do that again every summer. It's very typical of us to look at our budget and make adjustments to it.
And
So-
you're absolutely certain that that accommodation could be made? That
It could be made. I'm not sure that it's one I'd recommend. Katie?
No, I understand, but Blueberry would not be left in a lurch if...
No.
Okay.
Just,
Absolutely
we did
not.
it this summer, like the week before school started, we saw one of the kindergartens was
Booming.
so, I
Blueberry?
mean, really the week before.
No, it was at Wolf Swamp.
It was
Oh,
at
Wolf
Wolf
Swamp.
Swamp.
But
So,
we
was-
did add a first grade in August.
Oh, that, yeah.
Unfortunately, this year it was early in August rather than the last 2 years, which was the week before school.
So, I mean, it's not unheard, it's pretty, it's kind of a common, so,
And some of these numbers, and I'll use 3rd grade in particular because that's my grade that I actually have 5 teachers now. And so actually, in a way, that teacher would get transferred over. So some of this would actually already be within the staffing that we have that could be moved.
Okay, so what decision-making did I make? What decision-making did I use when I came forward with that proposal A as a recommendation? First, it was the preschool moving to Wolf Swamp, and therefore it was that Wolf Swamp couldn't take any more students at that point because with the preschool and the services that go with it, that put that at the number that we were looking for in the low 300s. It then meant that the only way to alleviate Blueberry from having overcrowding was to move students to center school. We then went through those neighborhoods, as I told you. I had Janet pin them, at which point I looked and analyzed and talked. We looked at all the factors there. And because of trying to keep the neighborhood together, not wanting busing, keeping the neighborhood intact, I thought the proposal A was the best one to go to. Also meeting with the police was important too. And the other neighborhoods had too few students. You would have had to expand it to several neighborhoods in order to get the numbers to work. The final thing was the proposal A is walking distance to center. It's just as close to center as it is to Blueberry. And if you looked at some of the other neighborhoods, they were much further away, and it meant that students, would be walking 1.5, almost 2 miles if they had to get to school by bike or walk. So at this point, I'll open it up for questions.
I don't suppose you have any, if we were to compare proposals that we still have on the table right now, we have C and we have E, do you have any way of developing data for us that would help us decide between the 3 that we have to choose from?
We do, and that's our next piece. So if we answer questions on this piece,
Okay.
It's
we've
actually
been,
2 pieces away. But,
Okay.
and I only could do data on A and C because E I wasn't sure really how to begin.
Right.
But I basically
a
did.
lot of unknown data there.
Yeah, basically what the 2 charts you just saw,
Yep.
I basically did those for A and C. So we'll get to those later.
So we have charts on what happens if you keep 5th grade, what happens if you keep 4th, what happens if you keep 3rd, 4th, 5th. So Marie's going to walk you through that in a few minutes. Okay? Alex? And then Deb? Oh, Deb, were you first?
So would I be correct in saying that 12 years ago that this process was completed in about the same time, from fall, then the decision was made in the spring? It's just that less transparency came forward sooner?
Correct. They would have been doing this as a group. There would have been a lot of breaks where a lot of research was done, a lot of collecting of information. Alex?
Yeah, to Michelle's question on Plan E. Plan E sort of just says that the assumption was to keep everything the way it is in Blueberry and Center. And then new students that are coming in for 1st grade, in order to gain a classroom, we would start to put new students that are moved in or haven't been enrolled in the district center.
Right.
And we did sort of numbers to sort of firm up, and we have about 46 first graders so far that have been registered. That means they're in the Blueberry only zone and in the big buffer zone. That would make it 46. So I guess the magic number is if you keep it under 60 or 62, 63, let's say, then you only have 3 first grades in Blueberry, and then the 5th grade that's graduating in a month, that has 4 classes. So you would gain a classroom there. And if you do that next year as well, you would still gain another classroom. And then in 2 years with Mary Pratt, where my daughter is in 3rd grade now, those are 5 classes. So if you still keep it within 3 classes in Blueberry, you would gain 2 classrooms there to get to 4 classrooms in 2 years. That's how planning worked. Or at least that's how that was the premise. And that meant everybody stays where they are in terms of family in every school that they've been. So it's sort of all in grandfathering.
Mm-hmm. And you'll see with Marie's charts, Michelle answer your question explicitly about what happens if 1 grade level goes, if 2, if 3, if everyone's grandfathered, what happens. Deb?
I think there's been a misunderstanding in the community because some of the data didn't come out in a timely fashion. Questioning whether this is necessary or not to redistrict, and we heard that at the meeting in some ways. And my question to you is, especially after watching what happened in Ludlow with them getting audited by the federal government, my question to you is that information that you shared about Blueberry, does that also put us in civil rights violation just like Ludlow was, and they then had to add $250,000 onto their budget to add their modular rooms? And if we continue this way, we could well be in the same situation, except our budget would be more like $563,000 at a minimum if we find ourselves in that same situation without acting.
Right. For people who don't know, Ludlow was audited by the civil rights and found to be in violation because they had 4 special education teachers in 1 room like Blueberry. So the answer to your question, when our auditor comes next year, yes, they will probably find us guilty because we see the patterns follow. The Blueberry special education has risen recently so that we had an additional teacher added. I called Ludlow to ask about the modular classrooms because I knew that was information that people would like to know. They are paying $100,000 for site work to have 2 classrooms added. So that's just the site work. They have found secondhand classrooms because they were only going to keep them for 5 years to hoping to build a new school. And with the that for 5 years, they hope to get 2 of them for $50,000. But they had the town budget $250,000 because they're not sure they can lock in those prices of $50,000 for 2 used classrooms. So for 2 classes, they have budgeted $150,000 to $250,000. If you go to one of the last slides, let me move this for you, our budget. If you look at this is, it's one of your last slides. It's estimated cost to grandfather students of Blueberry with or without adjustments. If you go down to the bottom, I've spelled out what the modular classroom expenses would be. So it's $150 to $250 for 2 if you can find used ones in decent shape. If we need 3 to 5 additional rooms because we grandfather kids in, then we're going to be looking anywhere from $350,000 to $500,000. Tom?
Are those so expensive because they have to meet some kind of code to be a modular classroom for instructional space?
They're different than what you'd use on a work site. They're larger than a typical class. They do definitely have to have code. It depends how far they are from a bathroom. You have to wire electricity and plumbing and all that into the room.
And that's because they're
AC.
Classrooms, because they're instructional space?
Yes.
So I believe that Michelle said at our last meeting an idea that I like the sound of, which was, is there any way to use modulars for non-instructional space, perhaps faculty offices, and then in-building room could be used for instructional space? Could that trim the cost here and kind of, go ahead.
Michelle?
I can speak to that because I made some phone calls, and I looked into that basically because I knew it wouldn't be cost effective to use classrooms, but if I could just tell you what I learned today. If we did want to get modular space and not use it for classrooms, I have a quote that, and again, this would be, we'd have to be creative, but I thought, the conference room could be potential learning space, and if we made the conference room in the modular space, then we gained some space. To rent a 60 to 64 foot by 12 feet wide, which would accommodate approximately 20 people, I was just kind of thinking in general terms. They would provide, the furniture and whatever we needed in there. That was $875 a month. Plus installation and delivery was $700 each way. So, and that was a 12-month lease. If you did a 24-month lease, it's lower, it's $830 a month. So just, that would hook into an electrical power supply. It would have all the HVAC already included. The electric bill could go up from that space, and we'd have to I could even get that from my husband if I needed to, but it would go outside of the building that has a ramp, steps, because it would need to be, for code. But again, it wouldn't be for learning space. It would be for adding storage or something outside of the building. But it's an idea, it's outside of the box,
yeah.
but I wanted to give you that quote because it's very different than if we were looking for
It's very
modular.
different, and I have to say, when I speak to any superintendents and put them in, the number's more like Ludlow. So I'm curious about that. It would be certainly something a subgroup should look at.
Yeah, no, this was William Scotsman. It was somebody that I got from my husband, and they gave me the quote today, and we could certainly have a sales rep come in and look at the site. But this would go outside. It doesn't attach to the building. It would, we could put an awning on it or something, but it would need to be, by fire code, not connected to the building. But, you could potentially walk outside for a copier room or something. It's just outside of the box, but it was something I felt like I needed to explore.
Okay.
I just
Then
have a
Elizabeth.
question about,
Katie, I'm
sorry.
I just saw her
No,
hand.
go ahead, you were first.
Can we do that with, do we have to go out to bid for, because it's over the dollar, so.
I would never, this was one person, I would never want
I know, I'm just thinking about like some of the prices that
Yeah.
we like kind of
Schools
guesstimate
are
and then what we
different
actually
too.
get for,
So
yeah.
we really need to do a study.
That's what I was curious about contractually from a teacher perspective, even if it's just any space. I mean, I'm sure, I can't imagine if we can't put students in it, that a teacher would also have in their contract the ability to be put in there.
Right, and it's
But
it's
it
a
is-
very
it is something,
humane
yes,
space.
yes.
You
Oh,
know,
I'm sure it
so it would
is,
just
but-
be like if we wanted to make the conference room learning space and put the conference room out there and people were willing to do it, it's a thought.
Yes,
you know?
definitely.
And but again, they're furnished, they're carpeted, heated, ventilated. They're not. It's not just like a shed. But it could also be used for storage. They're potentially. We're right now apparently working in some storage spaces. So if we move the storage out there, it's a thought.
And a quick question on that, on those.
Alex, then Tom. Who was first? Marie?
I think I was. I just want to be mindful, it's just not about space. It is about equity. And it's not, there's 150 more students, and if you would go back to that slide you just had up, that I do not have the same services, or my children at Blueberry do not have some of the same services that the other two schools have. The easiest example I can give you is we all have one math specialist. But at my school, there's 150 more students there. So a kid could move to another schools and get math services that never got them at Blueberry because of the numbers. So I just we seem to be focusing on space, and it's not just a space issue.
And if I could, I just want to speak to that because that's the
Yes,
other
and
piece of the puzzle, and I'm
Mhm.
very aware of that.
Yes,
and
I
you and
know
I
you
have
are.
conversations. So when we get to that, I definitely want to
Yeah.
address that because I
Okay.
do think that my kids are these kids,
Yeah.
so I do want them to have fair
Mhm.
and I'd say educationally
Right.
appropriate staffing. So that's another piece of the puzzle in my mind, and I would certainly be advocating for Blueberry to have what they need. My kids are a part of it, so.
And I just add for every staff member, it's more space. Deb?
Can you clarify for the community what exactly is the civil rights violation right now at Blueberry?
Yes, it's a
Or that
civil
could
rights.
become it?
I'm sorry, it's a civil rights violation that there are so many children and teachers in one space that it's not an appropriate learning space to have that many teachers and students in a room. It's too crowded, the noise factor interferes with their learning, so they perceive that as a civil rights violation of the children.
Okay. Does that have anything to do with the teachers, ELL teachers sharing with space with the special education teachers?
They don't like it. In one audit, when I was a principal, we were cited for that. In another audit, we were not, because we had two people in a room. When we had an ELL teacher with two special ed teachers, we were cited. Depends on your auditor, but when you get up to 3 and 4 people in a room, they cite you. So.
Okay, so we're in
In my
danger of that.
experience. Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you.
Alex, then Michelle?
So, that point, if we sort of cut that room in half, the one that it's got four tables right now, that would be 2 per room. So I guess there is also that sort of easy solution. You just divide the room in half, just like you have done right now with bookshelves. You
Sure.
can do it a permanent and then creates the privacy
Sure.
space, right?
But they also have square footage they look at for this. It's not just making smaller rooms within it, but that's possible if you have a large room and could break it down that way. Depends on the room. Okay? Michelle?
And I've seen the spaces that were toward the building, and I support that the learning is difficult, and I want to fix that. So that I know we've been talking about a lot of different things, and I don't want to lose focus on that because that's very much something that you and I have talked about for a year and a half, 2 years. So thank you.
On the prices, I just wanted to mention, is that all every year, or is that a capital outlay the first year, and then there is because I thought there was somewhere in the $100,000 range to have it installed in the prices that you've quoted, and then it's about $20,000 a year to maintain it. So it's not every year.
Ludlow's buying them, so that's inclusive. There are other communities that rent them, and so the upfront isn't as much. You'd only save the $50,000, but you're paying an annual fee to rent them. So communities do it both ways.
So that price is all in?
That's all
to
in
buy
1
it,
year.
to keep it? And we have these in, is it in Williams?
We have them at Williams, and we own them, and they're about 20 years old.
Right, and last piece, when we're talking about equity, it's also unequitable to have somebody's children being moved like furniture, so let's keep that in mind.
Michelle?
I do want to add that I wouldn't support this for a long-term solution, just a short-term. I would not want to, like, we referred to, I don't want them there for 20 years. We have space at the other schools, and unless we need them, because none of our schools have it, it would just be something that I would be looking to for temporary.
Okay. So at this point, I'm going to move us on, because we have still, I'm sorry.
I guess I just have a question for Marie Pratt. Do you have enough learning spaces, current learning spaces, that you could give up as non-learning spaces that could be potential modulars?
No, not really. I mean, I would have to think about that. That was news tonight, but I couldn't think of, I think Elizabeth said it well, like what kind of space would go there? I mean, even in the conference room, I would have to see the space, see where it was going to be located, but no, couldn't think of much off the top of my head.
All right, I am going to move us on. So next.
Can I have just one last question? For how long has this been going on?
For the night?
No.
Yes, Alex.
Good try. Good try. For how long has this been going on? I mean, we are in a situation that we need to do something. I acknowledge that, but for how long has it been going on? And that's the thing. The issue is it didn't happen overnight. That needs to be solved overnight. How long have we had this situation?
Well, I think there's two situations. There's the enrollment, and I would say we can look at that chart that was passed out the first night. I would say roughly 7 years ago for me, it could be longer, I don't have the chart in front of me, the enrollment definitely started, it was that disparity. As far as space, the space part has come over in the last probably 3 to 4 years. I'll give an example. Jenna came and toured the other day. She happens to know one of the people that that works in the 4 people staff room, and she knows her personally, and she was there 3 years ago, and then she went on, she shared it with 2, and then she came back from maternity leave, and now she's with 4. So it's really within the last 3 to 4 years of the space. And this is the first time I think we've ever had 2 grade levels of 5 sections.
We've added technology, we've added literacy, we've added the WIN blocks. I'm missing something. We've added special ed programs, and they've all been over the technology started 3 years ago.
The ELL population is really a recent growth.
Armin?
As well.
Yeah, I think that's really important for the public to understand, is that a lot of this isn't just the number of students in the schools. And the school committee, for a long time, has been working to put more services back with our children. When I came onto the school committee back in 2007, 2008, I can't remember, but it's a long time ago. We didn't have the reading specialists, and we didn't have the math specialists, and we didn't have instrumental string program. We didn't have the technology stuff that we're talking about with the smart boards and with the smart board you see here, and that take up a lot of space in the classrooms that wasn't there when we had the same number of children. But now we're adding a bunch of services back into the schools. A lot of it centered around trying to help that and service that most vulnerable population of our students, to help, like Mary was talking about, was the whole intervention programs early on and adding a bunch of services around that. So a lot of services, a lot of teachers, a lot of support staff were added back to help it out. And that should not go unnoticed in this whole debate, that it's not just about the population, it's about the services we're offering at this time that have been added thanks to the work of the administration and the school committee working together.
And I want to thank the school committee, because I do think that our elementary school students could do even better, and we've been providing more services and supports to help them flourish early on. We believe very much in early intervention, but a lot of these programs we've added are necessary and will really help students excel.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
At the last meeting, I think I asked Marie Pratt a question that put her on the spot, and I see now why it was the wrong question. I think I asked you, what is kind of the magic number of student? Now I think the better question to ask is, how many rooms do you feel you need to be freed? Is that something that we could build off of?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, it's those two questions. That answers the space question. It doesn't necessarily answer the equity question.
Right.
So minimally, 2.
Okay.
That would give me where only 2 people would be sharing a room. That's as long as if I don't gain any more sections of grades.
Yeah. And I understand it's not the whole story, but it's
Yeah.
a framework.
Yeah.
It's something to shoot for. So thank you.
Yes.
Which is unlikely to get 5 first graders, given the numbers. Right?
No, but it's not unlikely if, say, no redistricting happened, that I could end up with 4.
Which is with the status quo, because 4 are graduating and 4 are
Right.
coming in, right?
Right. But then I would need 3 rooms. Right now, I'm banking that I only have 3, so that actually frees up 1 room that I don't have this year, and then I would need 2 rooms.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so in essence, 3 rooms.
Right.
But I'm planning on 1.
Right. 2 more.
You've already banked 1. When
Right.
5th
I'm
graders
hoping,
graduating.
with-
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
And
Yes.
2 more in
Yes.
it. Yeah.
But when we looked at modulars, we also estimated 3 to 5 to relieve some of the double spaces that are not ideal learning situations.
Right, if we didn't use any of our storage spaces, we got our storage back, yes, then we would need more.
So I think 3 to 5 is really the answer, because we don't want to use storage and we don't want to have more than 2 teachers in a room. Am I right or not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna,
I
3
think
to 5 would be fine with me.
You're being generous, as you always are.
Right.
But if we're looking at equity with the other schools, we're really looking 3 to 5.
And I fully appreciate that. I
Yeah.
was more asking for a minimum, understanding that was a
Okay.
minimum. So
Mhm.
thank you.
At this point, I'd like to move on and discuss the forum. I think people were very honest and upfront. I know that I had Janet and Katie collecting data and taking notes at the meeting, so I think at this point Janet's going to report back, then we'll open it up for discussion. Okay?
Oh, I'm reporting back?
You're not?
Well, I didn't know I was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But that's okay.
Okay.
That's all right. I'm
Because you collected letters.
I'm good on my feet.
All right, sorry about that.
That's all right. So,
Well, I can open it up for public discussion.
yeah, we can do that. I have just so that everybody knows, the letters and the petitions that were cited that night. Katie and I had put out a joint document to all of you, summarizing the notes that we took on the speakers. And Katie did give me the petitions and of what she received from her side of the auditorium. I had mine. So what I've done since then is confirm names and addresses, that they're valid, and that, so we have, and I haven't added them all up, but we have 291 total who expressed opposition to Proposal E, and 104, or 107, I'm sorry, whose petition also recommended moving forward with Proposal A. So I do have those. I do know that there were some.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Sorry, I noticed in the minutes that you were missing some of our signatures
From
the meeting.
From which speaker?
From Miss Kylene and also Alex. So I have our group right here.
Okay, I'll need to
Yep.
verify all of those.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I did notice that they were missing, so I hunted them down.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? You said that there were the 291 that were just in opposition to E.
Correct.
And then an additional 107 that were also, that were. in addition to-
107 out of the,
Oh, okay, of the, so 291 is the total of that.
Of
half,
opposition
a
to
little over-
E.
A little under
Right.
half, okay.
right, and like I said, I didn't have these numbers
Yep.
or petitions to verify or count at that time, because they weren't turned in that evening.
So, just to quickly clarify, so that means that the 107 for A were also against E?
They were
Correct.
part of the 291 that she said.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Armin, then Rachel.
So just, we'll assume the signatures are valid. What does that petition say?
What does this one say?
It's for grandfather.
Regardless of which neighborhood is districted, please grandfather existing enrolled students and their siblings that are currently at their elementary school.
And how many signatures, Jenna?
I believe in total, if you count the package that Alex and us put together, I think there were 73, and I believe Kate, Kylene had 153, so I think when I counted them right before I came, it was 226. Which should go in line with the numbers that
Now,
came.
I guess I have a question of how the committee would like me to handle this. A lot of these are dated after the forum date. So I don't know how the committee would like me to.
We discussed it briefly when we were going through the presentation of how long we'd be accepting emails for it, and I think when we talked about it last week when we met to go over the presentation, we weren't going to cap when people could submit their letters, so if they had submitted it today through email to the redistricting, would have received it
Okay.
tonight versus.
I just didn't know because
Yeah.
I was solely working off of the.
I don't know if it would go in with the form because it's dated after the form, but regardless, it's a letter to the committee that needs to be, incorporated in some way, shape, or form, and it's added to that spreadsheet Jenna put together last week that had.
Yeah, and actually, if I can also, I like spreadsheets, sorry. I did put together very similar to the spreadsheet that I did last time, but in an easier format. This is kind of like a tick sheet, very similar to what you did, but it doesn't have.
For the emails or for the.
This was just from the forum. So I did, it's got petitions on here. And basically, I didn't know if it would be helpful if I kind of passed it out. This was keeping track of everything. I'm sorry, it's not just from the forum. It's basically a continuation of the spreadsheet that I had sent to Diane and Marie, keeping track of all the letters that have come in. What happened was that first meeting, I think I had capped the letters at 4-7. A bunch of emails came into the mailbox between 4-7 and the public forum. I went back, added those all in, and then continued to tick and write,
That would be great if you could pass that out.
So if everybody wants to take one, I just thought it helps, oops, sorry.
Armin, may I take
And one more.
Thank you.
And I did go back through, the document that Katie had published and kind of ticked back and forth, and it seemed like it came within, I didn't go through Katie's document with a fine-tooth comb, because it kind of came, a little bit late for me to compare and contrast both documents, but this is a pretty good indication of, kind of everybody's voices through the letters, through the forum, through the petitions.
Michael?
I certainly can't verify the accuracy of any of what Jen is presenting, and although I was sitting next to her and
I was writing copious
I was
notes.
afraid I was going to get stabbed a couple of times.
I was writing a lot,
I
yes.
do give her a lot of credit for capturing all this. I think the one thing that stood out to me on Tuesday night, and probably to everybody in this room, and frankly, I'm sure to most people at home, is that option E doesn't appear to be an option. And so we've got a lot to talk about, and I don't know that it's appropriate to move to table E.
But I think that I'd be inclined to do that so that we can stop talking about E and we can talk about some other options that might be viable.
Could I have a motion?
Well, before we do that, I'm not objecting to that. I think we're gonna get there, but I would like to finish discussing review feedback and then move to that.
I disagree. I disagree. We have to.
All right, I'll-
motion that we strike proposal E as
I
part of our
second.
discussion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Voting members, all opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, it's unanimous, so we are taking E off the table, okay?
Thank you.
All right,
I do have a question, just from a logistics perspective. Does that take off the E people from a committee, just from a voting perspective? I want to make sure that we don't go back in the future.
no.
How many?
I just want to make sure that down the road that doesn't come back, that people say that, you know, I want to make sure that we have transparency and clarity on everyone's roles and.
They're lifers.
Okay, once you're in, you can't get out. I love it.
Alex.
I'm gonna have to disagree with that. They were put here to represent their neighborhood. Now that their neighborhood is not involved, it's inappropriate for them to vote. There's crossover.
Alex, we brought everyone together to make decisions. It's my committee. I respectfully disagree. I'm going to keep them on. At this point, I would like an advisory group that's representative of the large part of town, so I'm going to make that executive decision and keep the committee. Michael?
I would just suggest also that there's crossover. E neighborhoods with C neighborhoods with A neighborhoods, or not A, I guess, but there's crossover. So I would suggest if you're here, you're in.
Okay. Other questions?
He's gone.
Somebody was here.
Want to get some coffee?
I mean, he's dead on
Okay.
His number fest.
So, other feedback from the community. Michelle?
I had a very archaic form of what Jenna drew up, just a little tally sheet on chicken scratch, but, you know, I think I heard no to E, I heard grandfathering all students and families, and I think there were two more themes that I heard. Let's see if they're somehow reflected in here, but, you know, the process, they wanted more transparency. Maybe it was just great, but.
Yeah, the slowing the process and the transparency, I do have to apologize. Right before I came, I did notice that I have like two categories that are pretty much the same thing: stop or slow the process and regroup, and where is it? Slowing down the process. Those are pretty much the same sort of category. So I think if you total the two together, it's like 13. So it technically would move up on the list. But I think that's probably a more common thing.
Rachel?
I have just a clarifying question. I think it was Janet that just had shared earlier on some of the numbers from the signatures that you have. Of the 291 that were against E, you said 107 of them out of those were recommending that we move forward with proposal A as it is or with grandfathering?
Yes, as it is. I can read you their letter.
Okay.
Their
'Cause I
actual-
didn't hear that come out at the.
It definitely did not come out at the forum.
Okay,
No.
but
Okay.
reflected
Their
in
letter-
the signatures, that's the case. I just was making sure I understood what they were.
I actually remember them reading their letter.
Yeah, I remember the letter.
Okay, so-
Yeah.
Said trust the
It
process.
was the letter, yeah.
So the letter in whole states, as outlined in Superintendent Doyle's letter to the Longmeadow community, the key priorities of the redistricting process are to balance enrollment, maintain safety for students, and find the least disruptive solution for our community. Of the three current options, we ask that Proposal E be removed from consideration at this time. It is the least effective and most disruptive. First and foremost, Proposal E does nothing to solve the most pressing and imminent problem, the overcrowding of Blueberry Hill School. Proposal E will not reduce enrollment at Blueberry Hill in the 2015-16 school year. In addition, Proposal E is the most disruptive option to one of the fundamental foundations of Longmeadow, which is our neighborhood school system. To have children from the same block going to different schools and to have property owners in a large portion of the town be in a swing state is overly disruptive. We've been advised by local realtors that the uncertainty created under this option will negatively impact home values for the affected homeowners. We respectfully ask that the Longmeadow school administrators carry out the job entrusted to them. A redistricting decision should not be a popularity contest, nor should it be a public battle pitting neighbor against neighbor. This should be a decision based on non-biased, data-driven analysis by impartial parties. Earlier this year, Superintendent Doyle recommended implementing Proposal A as the least disruptive option to rebalance enrollment at the 3 schools. It cannot be ignored that Proposal A has also been identified as the safest plan for the affected children by the Chief of Police. Accordingly, the superintendent should stand her original recommendation, and the school committee should support the people who have been hired to make these recommendations. You cannot please everyone in this process. What you can do is make the best non-biased decision for the children and the families that are involved. We trust that as educational professionals and selected school committee representatives, you will make the right decision for the right reason. Respectfully, concerned parents and property owners. So by the wording of that, it's opposing E and in favor of A.
And was it signed by 120 people?
107.
107, okay. And that was, I had that outlined in my notes as favoring neighborhood schools, keeping neighborhood schools as well, because they really talked about that a lot, in my opinion, so, sorry.
Michael?
I like to move things along. I've run 16-minute school committee meetings before, so I kind of like this.
Superintendent.
Don't tell anybody that. If I may be so bold as to suggest following the elimination of E with the elimination of C, I think that if you look at, again, I'll trust that Jenna's data is accurate here. The feedback that I heard the other night, the feedback that I'm hearing in town really focuses on whether A is a viable, whether A is a viable option, not whether any of the other options were truly viable, but whether A is viable, and if it is viable in any way, how much, if any, grandfathering needs to be associated with it. So if I'm trying to take a lead here maybe and suggest that we take C off the table and we look at A, and then we discuss what I think is the most critical element of A, and that is how much, if any, grandfathering is going to occur for students and families at Blueberry.
If I could make a response to that?
Tom, then Alex.
So, the message I heard loud and clear at the public forum was that E was a bad idea, and I'm very happy that we took care of that right away, and I appreciate the motion to do that. The second message that I heard loud and clear was the grandfathering of all students, and that's reflected in Jenna's document here. But the grandfathering of all students doesn't address the most pressing needs of Blueberry. The third message that I heard loud and clear was to slow down the process. And I said at the meeting, and I'll say it again, I am an amateur at this. If you need someone to teach the town molecular genetics, I'm your guy. But I don't know anything about redistricting, and I don't know anything about the myriad of factors that go into this. So rather than speed the process along, I would ask that we slow down considerably and seek expert opinions on this, unbiased opinions from outsiders trained in this type of exercise that we can then vet from the perspective of townspeople rather than move ahead with plans that, in my opinion, have been crafted by amateurs.
I'll try not to take umbrage to that.
No, I mean in this, and I'm speaking of myself
okay.
as a town member, not those. When I say crafted, I take ownership over all the plans we've presented because they've come from this committee.
I would like to say I called the consultant. Kim King and Michelle asked that I do that at the last school committee meeting and went through our entire process. He said it would have been better to start the process earlier and be public, as I apologized for, because that was the feedback I got from a professional. I've gone through what we've done, the steps we've taken. It's exactly what they would have done. He also said to me, I would not turn this over to anyone. You know your district. You should lead them through this. What we're going through is what happens in every district when you do this. It's a very, very painful process.
If that's true, how do these consulting companies stay in business then?
Well, some will come in and do it for you and charge an exorbitant rate. Also, if you look at where most of the consultants, I called another company as well, they do huge districts. And again, Newton's an example of a district that's hired a consultant. They're going from 15 elementary schools to 16. We have 3. And it was clear that we only have 2 because Wolf Swamp is off the table because of the preschool. So given our numbers, we're not a district that really needs a consultant, in my professional opinion. Alex?
Following what Michael had said, If anybody wants to finish this process more than me, I don't think there's anybody in this town. So let's see if we can end this and finish it tonight. And just a couple observations from what the community said. A lot of playing the opponents, and it's expected because a large population of the town. So you have the numbers there. When you look at A versus E, there is a significant amount of so if you look at comparatively with the numbers, A was a lot louder in terms of numbers percentage-wise. And nevertheless, E had the right to say, "Why are you dragging me into this? Redistricting in my house is a bad idea." It's kind of like, I'm in the renewable power, so if anybody needs anything about renewable power, I'm your guy. But it's kind of like renewable power. Windmills are great as long as you don't put them in my backyard. So that's what I think E kept saying, well, I'm going to become this big swing area, and that's bad for community, it's bad for my real estate value, bad for everything. It's clear that the town doesn't have a stomach for Proposal E. I'm glad we took that off the table. But what struck me the most about Plan A was that they didn't care as much about the fact that if they get redistricted, they're going to de facto be a swing area. And so many people who were supporting E, that's what they pointed out and said, "You're going to make my house a swing district." The realtors we heard, everybody else said, "You're going to make me." But nevertheless, zeroing in on a small neighborhood A, that would be de facto swing area that the realtors testified people would try to avoid. So they still would sacrifice that if you grandfather their children. So that, I think that's the thing that struck me the most, how unselfish in that regard they were to still put the community together and take another one for the team, but to not impact their children. So I'm ready to move tonight. Let's redistrict neighborhood A, but grandfather the children. So, and be done with this process.
So I move to eliminate neighborhood C from discussion.
Second.
Michael, you seconded?
Wait. I thought I just moved for A, but.
You didn't. But you didn't move for A. You said I'd like to go ahead and talk about A. So I figured the way to do that is to get rid of C.
And
Said
Mike was
I'm
ambiguous
ready
in how
to
he
move.
presented it too. So I have a motion on the floor, I have a second, is there any discussion?
Can you say the motion again?
Eliminate C from discussion. So we can focus on what Alex just said, which is the idea of A and redistrict and grandfathering. There's no other way that we can talk about what you just said without eliminating C.
I was going to skip that route and just go directly to
Okay.
A and move that as the recommendation, but sure.
I think this is a good course. So any other discussion? The motion on the floor is to eliminate
Do you have a question?
Proposal C.
We do have
Rachel?
several charts here, and I'm all for moving things along, but that do highlight the numbers as they would stand with grandfathering without for Proposal A and C. Would it be helpful to review that?
It would take a lot of time to go through C unnecessarily if this is going to pass. If it doesn't pass, then we'll certainly go through that for you. So I'd recommend that we move this to a vote if there's no more discussion. Michelle?
I'll just add that I'm going to have to abstain because I didn't compare A and C. You know, there were a few things that came out really strong, but I'm trying to look at my map and cram for the vote, but I wasn't prepared for that choice in terms of like but I don't think it matters. I'm guessing that there's not that many abstainers in here. I didn't look at the data that you're talking about or anything yet, so that's what I do before I vote, but I'm happy abstaining.
And if I can speak to the data that you're going to see, you've seen most of that data before. What I've added to that data is class size and how many teachers were needed. But the numbers roughly, except for I will say, these are updated K numbers as of yesterday.
If I may just interject and talk about what we had talked about at the last meeting, and I know that there are some new members, so they maybe weren't at the last meeting, but we had kind of said that today was going to be mostly a debrief of what had happened at the forum, and there was really going to be no, votes, and it was kind of agreed on by the committee members.
If Janet could read the final vote, because you're right, procedurally, there would need to be a motion to overturn that motion that was made. The last motion, I believe, was not to make a final decision tonight.
That was probably mine.
It was.
Point of order, Marie?
Yes.
So if that's the motion, if that was the motion not to make a final decision, eliminating other options would not take that off the board of the final recommendation.
Correct.
So there's a motion and a second. So that's
So
a point
we
of
can-
order.
Thank you very
Motion and second,
much.
is there any debate?
Right, so if there's no further debate, we'll take a vote on that, and then that can be another point of order. Okay, all in favor of removing C as a proposal? Okay.
Hold on. One,
Wait,
two,
I'm-
3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay.
All opposed? Okay. 2. Abstentions?
2.
2 abstentions. We will need to get back to Jenna's point of order if we come to if people make a motion to move on a final proposal for Neighborhood A. So we now have Neighborhood A down, and I'm going to ask Marie to present the data, because many of you have asked, what would it look like if you grandfather just 5th grade?
Did you want me to read what the vote at last meeting was? So the vote, Michelle made a motion that no vote on a final option to bring forward would be made, seconded by Alex. 7 in favor, 1 opposed, 3 abstain. So the wording was a motion that no vote on a final option to bring forward.
So point of order, if anybody was to make a motion, your first motion would have to be to rescind that vote. Okay. Okay.
Wait, I'm sorry.
We can't make a final decision tonight unless someone makes a motion that we are changing our minds on being able to make a final vote tonight.
But what we've done so far is.
We're okay. Yes. Michael?
I don't want to get anybody bogged down in open meeting law, but however the agenda was posted, I don't know whether there was any mention of a vote being taken or not. So I just to clear that up before it potentially becomes an issue for anybody later on. So I don't know how the agenda was posted. I know it's probably right here in front
Yeah,
of me.
we left
but
it open-ended with next steps.
Just want to make sure.
Yep. Okay. Michelle?
And if it helps the discussion, I am prepared to vote for some things, and I apologize for, putting that vote on the table. But I am happy abstaining when I need to abstain, and if it helps the discussion at all,
I think for me, it's trying to bring peace to the community.
And
I feel a need to do that, so.
as do I. So I apologize for having put that on us, because I think more than anybody as well, I just want to end what's going on for the families and the community. So I guess what I'm saying is I would support moving forward with voting tonight on things like we have already. You can't specify that I would be prepared to vote on everything, but, I think that I want to put an end to the pain in the community. So if that,
So did you want to make a motion?
I don't know, what kind of a motion would I make for this? Or if someone has one.
Norman?
Well, let's continue to discuss.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's
Okay.
I feel we want to move forward, we can approach that, but
Okay.
let's discuss what we need to do.
Alex?
Can I put a motion to recommend final decision to grandfather A to recommend redistricting neighborhood A and grandfather all children in neighborhood A?
So moved. Is there a second?
Grandfather all children and their families, their siblings, as it was laid out in the forum last night.
Is it all right if she amends that?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a
So
second?
to adopt A and grandfather,
All children and their families.
okay. So motion to adopt proposal A and grandfather all children and their families. Alex motioned. Was there a second? Jenna? You're seconding? Okay.
For point of discussion, I would like Marie to go through what the impact would be for that, so I will flip the slides while Marie does that.
So as I said, most of this information is charts you have seen, but I have added a couple columns. So after each grade, it tells you the class size. So I'll just use Blueberry Kindergarten. As of yesterday, we would have 44 students right now enrolled in kindergarten, so that would be 3 classes of 15. So you can just read that going across. Yes.
Marie, just as a point of information, can you give me what the operational definition of grandfathered is on that chart?
Sure, this is grandfather, this is with 5th graders only. So the
Rising
current-
5th graders for the next school year.
Next school year, anybody who's going into 5th grade that's currently at Blueberry that lives wherever, actually. Right,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
And also, while,
Yep.
am I correct in remembering that we voted at our last meeting to grandfather
so
both
this-
4th and 5th grade?
Well,
No,
No,
5th
just
grade
5th
only.
grade.
Yeah, because, 4th, because 5th is leaving.
So since we're down to one proposal right now, this would be, right now, based on our votes, what possibly could happen as far as numbers.
But these numbers are not reflective of the motion at hand. These numbers.
No,
Okay.
no, this is just for fifth grade, that we have voted fifth grade,
The last
incoming
meeting.
fifth graders would be
Regardless.
grandfathered regardless of plan. So since we only
So
have right
these
now
would-
one plan,
So Marie, these would be the numbers for next year
yes.
as of tonight with all votes that have been taken.
Right, and I do want to just clarify for the new members, in grades 1 through 5, we've been using raw data, meaning we have the addresses of all the kids, and so if they live in the neighborhoods that go to Blueberry Center and Will Swamp, because we have some kids who go to different schools, those numbers, these numbers are not exact. I will say right now, those K numbers are exact as of yesterday.
And none of the numbers include siblings, right?
Not the fifth grade siblings, no.
And question for you, Marie.
Yeah.
One of the things that had come up when we met to go over the presentation that didn't come up at the forum, but I'm not sure, and I would be curious as your thoughts on, is that you've said you have been approached about rescinding the sort of out-of-district attending of the special requests. And this, because she said this is based off of addresses, so this is sort of if it was rescinded, people going to the school that they are assigned to, not
Correct.
the school that they have requested.
Correct.
Okay. And that is something that you are considering.
Correct. And
It also
everyone
does
should
not-
know, that's a policy, so if you're a parent who is out of neighborhood and attending Blueberry Center or Wolf Swamp, every year you have to put in a letter. Every year we look at enrollment and class size and make a decision based upon that. So I think are you asking me, are we thinking of rescinding the
Yes.
policy? That is something that I could bring to school committee to ask.
But this is sort of using the,
So I will also say students who are enrolled in some of the special ed programs are not reflected in these numbers. These are really just the raw
Raw.
numbers. This is where you live, this is where your homeschool is.
Okay.
So these numbers, but since those numbers aren't very large, they're not going to make big changes in those numbers. So this slide
I'm
is
sorry, can you go back? I didn't really get a chance to. I was too busy thinking of my question. I apologize. I just want to make sure. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay? Everyone okay?
So this is at 4th and 5th, so incoming 4th and 5th. So current 3rd graders at Blueberry and 4th graders were to stay.
Okay?
You also have these in front of you as well.
Right.
Okay, so
It might be easier. All right?
So now we have my current 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders, if they were all to stay. Not siblings. I could not figure out within 2 days' time with their siblings staying. So again, now we're talking about current 1st graders through 4th graders, and if they were to stay.
I'm slowing down because I see a lot of you are still looking at the data, so. Okay, if you're ready to move to the next one.
So this is K through 4 staying at Blueberry. So in essence, this would be all current students. What I did do on the K numbers, I did look at siblings. So if those there are 8 now currently registered students who live in neighborhood A. 6 of them have siblings at Blueberry, so I now move them to Blueberry because of their being siblings. So that was the only one I could actually easily do siblings.
Right, so what this doesn't reflect is any siblings that wouldn't be in school yet.
Correct, correct. So I do want to make the emphasis, so if all current students are grandfathered and their siblings, there would be 2 students that would be redistricted to center. Of my incoming kindergarten and any other new students, but I don't have all that information yet. Alex.
So, throughout this process we've talked about, and I certainly have raised the issue of emotional impact and stress and everything associated with the children moving. And during the public forum, Stephanie Jasmine brought up some really compelling information about quantifying the impact to the students and their educational scores on the year that they moved. And that was a drastic reduction in terms of performance between what I saw. And I don't know if the data is accurate, but that was just scary how much there was an impact. Unless we moved all the bad students from Center to Blueberry, and which I think my neighborhood has got some smart kids. That to me makes it very scary because I know where we are, and I know you need space, but none of us are magicians to overnight create a space unless we sort of have a, in my mind, inhumane treatment of children, but that's okay.
Katie, so I went over that data actually, after Stephanie brought it up in the meeting, and the numbers are like kind of confusing in the way that they're presented, because if you look at the state numbers as well, we followed the trend. The state, I think the test changed slightly that year. But the dips that were taken across the district. It wasn't just like with one cohort of redistricted students. So if you pulled out those redistricted kids and looked at their data, that's what you could tell if it had that kind of impact.
But you have correlation, but there's no causation. I looked at, I did the graph today because I was very curious when we received that email. I'm sorry, I completely cut you off, Deb. But Wolf Swamp dropped even more drastically in that same time. So if you look at Wolf Swamp's numbers, they had a huge dip that same period. And so I looked at 2 years before and 2 years afterwards, and everybody took a hit that year. Math at Center went down and never recovered for a year or two. So I think that we had correlation, but I'd be very cautious of linking that directly to causation.
Deb?
And I'm sorry, Deb.
I think that really speaks to the community, and what she brought up really was a statement that reflected upon how the community's not understanding if process has been involved in transitioning of students, because it hasn't really been brought up at any of the meetings to discuss in the minutes for anybody to refer to. So the town members are concerned that there's not been enough thought in the transition, and offhanded comments have been made about poor transitioning, or just comments about lack of consideration, and I don't think that's reality. And I think that the community deserves to know and have it presented by Donna, who would be the person who is going to receive the students, what she has planned as presented in the transition committee has been meeting, and there's been no presentation of what they have come up with or what they're intending. There's just been a townwide assumption that nothing's been done, exactly because the opportunity has not presented itself to hear from her. And I'd really like to hear, hopefully sometime tonight, what that is. And I think the townspeople really want to hear what has been done, since that has also been left out as part of the transparency. And we all want to be reassured that thoughtfulness has been gone into this process. And certainly people who have been involved in the transition committee are dedicated to students in making this transition very kind as best they can and inviting for the students. But we've heard nothing on it, and that's disconcerting for the entire community.
We will put that on next steps tonight so that Donna can give us an update on what's been going on.
Can I just say, Donna, I've I've spoken to Donna about this, and she feels kind of like as if her hands are tied. Just, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this has not been done.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, we do have I have a transition plan, and I've shared it with my school council. I've talked about it with the staff. Marie and I have spent countless hours talking about how to transition the students to center. I did make a statement, it's in the minutes, where I talked about the dates that we were setting for a final decision, and about how it would be very problematic if we had a June date for the final decision about redistricting, how difficult that would be. We could do it, but it would be very difficult. But I would love to share it this evening at some point in time. I don't feel that this is an appropriate time, but I can tell you what steps have been taken.
Donna, let's add you to the section next steps for a transition update. Thank you, Deb. Michelle.
I know just in the way I vote, I would love to hear some of the transition stuff before I'm asked to vote, because I was concerned when I saw the MCAS scores, and I would still love to, sort of talk about this, because it was, alarming to me, and then she emailed them. So I printed them, and I'm just wondering if anybody can explain why, Blueberry would have gone down while Center stayed even. We don't have Wolf Swamp, but I would like to have that in front of me. This is just how I formulate, my decisions and everything. So the plan, and I'm aware of some of it, but, and I am comfortable that you would be doing everything you can from now until then, and that you already have. But I would love to hear it just before I decide what happens. So I guess if I could ask that we do that before we're asked to vote whether or not to grandfather or, anything that would be. And if anyone can speak to the difference between, Blueberry's trend and Center's in this time, I would appreciate, and or what happened with Wolf Swamp, if we can kind of put them all on the table so then we can see.
My printer's broken. I have it, and I created them this afternoon. My printer is not, so I don't know if I can get up on this thing or if I can email them out to unfortunately, I don't have it.
Email it to me, I can.
Okay, let me do that right now.
I got a dongle if you need it.
No, I just made it this afternoon. I went to MCAS, I went to the website and pulled out all the numbers. So you have to rely on the fact that I pulled hard numbers and made graph lines, much like Stephanie did. I just added in Wolf Swamps, and I added in math because she had only included ELA and English. So bear with me a quick second. And they are just going to be, I apologize because everything's not working at my house. It is,
I have graphs from 03
Okay.
to present for just ELA and math.
Okay.
And just for Center and Blueberry, so that you can see,
Do you want to hop
over
on?
the years. So if you want to peek at them while, I'm just trying to get her information out, it might give you some idea as to the fluctuation in MCAS scores. Not necessarily.
Armand?
Yeah, and on the Department of Education website for Massachusetts, they make it very clear that there is one you should not put anything into 1 year. Incrementally, they said it can change significantly in 1 year, and so from a statistical viewpoint, the Mass DOE looks at it from a 5-year perspective, and they caution people when you look at the data to look at it in that 5-year perspective. But speaking to what Deb just said very eloquently, I was on the playground today at Center School. I was hearing some of the same type of things Deb was talking about. I saw you there at the committee the other day. How are our children going to be affected? What's the transition plan? And I second what I've heard here with, I know Donna's raring to go, so I'm with Michelle on this one. I want to hear this too.
So you'll speak to this?
Yes, those are her, those are.
Those are mine, yeah. So
Oh,
if
sorry,
I
I just bumped you. Sue, do you want to go first?
Either or.
Sorry.
Well, I can just, if you guys just want to quickly, so this was Wolf Swamp from 2002, 2003, 4, and 5. So we have the year before, the 2 years before, the year after, and then redistricting, and then the following year. You have reading, ELA, and math in the 3 colors. And as you can see, math, following the ELA score, it went from 85 to 72. It took about a 13-point hit over 1 year, which is, I think it was the Blueberry one was like an 8-point. So, I mean, it took a significant 1-year drop. And you can see their math scores also went down, had a big drop from year to year. So I think it's just sort of showing you, I went to East Longmeadow and they had the same thing. If you look at sort of that district for those years, I would just caution relying that there's some correlation there, but I don't think, I would be hesitant to say that redistricting caused math scores at Blueberry to go down, or ELA scores.
Just, I mean,
And you can switch over, I sent you.
Yep, Susan can bump.
I think that's great.
yeah, that's what I was looking for,
any
like
helpful
more
or not.
comprehensive view, because the data that I sort of saw today was going from 80 to 50.
Right.
In Blueberry and not in Center, wasn't that drastic of a change. So I understand we can't pick the children there, but there was that event that happened that year in that school. So I don't know if it was the children that were impacted. Was it that the staff wasn't equipped to handle the added? I don't know, but it was a very strikingly different numbers. From 80 to 50, that's a huge
It wasn't,
percentage.
I don't think it was 80 to 50, it was, what?
I don't remember exactly, it was in the 70s, we were 80 the two years prior to that, and we did take a big drop. And I will have to look back at my school council notes. It was my second year as a principal, so trust me, it got my attention.
So we're looking at there we go, problem solved.
Yeah, and I can honestly say redistricting never entered my mind that was a cause. You know, I vaguely remember, and I would have to check my notes, it was a relatively new fourth grade team. It was my fourth grade scores, because if you look at third and fifth, didn't change. So either only that group of children were impacted, but my third and fifth scores did not have the same drastic. It was really my fourth grade scores.
Isn't fourth grade historically the?
Well, our fourth grade last year tanked.
Yeah, so I can't, you know, sometimes.
If you look over time, you can see dips and valleys and peaks, and
The test
you know,
really accelerates.
the test is a concern at times. The numbers of students in any given grade are a concern. The number of students who are taking a portfolio assessment as opposed to a regular MCAS get weighted in the scores. So there are all kinds of reasons, and our numbers are relatively small. So we're looking at percentages, they're pretty skewed pretty quickly by, just a few students.
And what we're doing right is all the teachers are doing the same curriculum. They have the same staff development. In terms of recent dips, we have new programs in literacy. That's to be expected. This is now our third year of Reader and Writers Workshops. The teachers are being trained on Writers Workshop. But if you're a teacher at Blueberry Center or Wolf Swamp, you've had the same training. Math, everybody's piloting right now. That will be next year in terms of a new program and staff development. So I think in terms of a transition, there's a lot of continuity in the district right now, so that I would feel very comfortable that students are going to walk from the same experience from one school to another. Tom?
Would you say that wasn't so much the case at the last?
I wasn't here, I'd have to have Marie answer that. I know that when I came, Tom, when I came 5 years ago, there were no curriculum reviews, and the curriculum was different at each school.
Well, so that's an answer then.
So
Yes, it must have been the same prior to that as well.
Right, so in the past 5 years, we've made a concerted effort to rebuild, to have curriculum reviews every year, and to space this out, but we're building continuity in the district. Alex?
So, I mean, I like data, so I'm trying to understand, was the data that was sent to us incorrect? Can we put those charts? I guess that's all I'm just trying to understand.
We can analyze this, Alex, and go in depth, because Elizabeth's right. You have to look at the state score to see if the entire state dipped. Did they change the test? Because you'll see a change in scores when the test is changed. You have to look at the state data to get an understanding of what's going on with the test, and then you look in district to see what's happened in district. Then you analyze right down to the level Marie did, if it was a new team of teachers as opposed to an experienced team. Those are all factors, but we can go back and try and find out, because I'm curious too. I'd like to know.
Or was there redistricting as well?
Exactly. So, absolutely.
But, because I have some I did some work research that I'm not today as well on the DISIA website. Again, I'll say, my fourth grade dropped, my ELA dropped 18 points. My grade 3 reading went up 2 points. They were at 81% proficient advanced in 2004, and they went up to 83%. So again, it's particular to fourth grade. The other scores did not have the same fluctuation those years.
Could that age have more of an impact in terms of the redistricting?
I don't remember the numbers offhand.
They don't take MCAS until well into their school year, so they should be settled in by then.
Right.
Did anyone
But I think he was asking as far as numbers of kids.
No, he was
Right.
asking if as they get older, would the redistricting have more of an impact on their?
Yeah, that
Well,
was.
so I'll say my science scores in fifth grade actually went up 2 points as well.
Tom?
I appreciate all of this research very much and this information. Did anyone happen to see what the state numbers did for the fourth grade test that same year?
I have the field
I-
numbers in front of me.
Did they also drop?
Yes.
In math, they did. In third grade reading, from '03 to '04, let's see.
It's actually,
This was
my drop was '04 to
Went to
'05.
63 and
four
more.
grade.
'04 to '05, we're looking at
My
'04,
biggest drop was-
'05. Fourth grade ELA?
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
They dropped.
Yep.
Statewide.
Yep, statewide.
By 6 points.
By 6 points.
No, it was a significant drop, I'm not gonna tell you.
Yeah,
I remember it.
And really, again, I
should
don't want to beat a
stay
dead
on there.
horse, but having sat through several MCAS presentations, really fourth grade history, it's a tough year, no matter if you are maintaining, if there's no redistricting going on, it just seems like the fourth grade has a tough year on the test.
Alex?
Point of clarification, Ms. Doyle. You said that all schools follow the same curriculum? Is that true?
In Longmeadow.
In
And we
Longmeadow.
follow the Common Core.
So, why I sort of have information that Blueberry Hill follows sort of a New York standard and the other two follow the Mass standard? That Blueberry had a pilot? Am I incorrect in
They're
that statement?
piloting, and all the schools are piloting all three programs. They're piloting Eureka, Expressions, and Go Math. So your teacher in a certain school may be on one right now, but they've agreed to do the same unit of study. For example, it might be everyone's doing decimals in the 5th grade throughout the district. So it's agreed upon they're doing the same unit, and teachers at the same grade level will try at least one of the programs. And then they're reporting back. Sue has rubrics set up, the math committee's reviewing it. They're also talking to teachers. We already have a lot of feedback, but the math committee will make that decision in June, and we'll be going with a new program next year.
So this piloting is happening in all schools?
Mhm.
Okay.
And so are you saying that all students are learning the same content, but that content's being delivered in different ways?
Different
Correct.
text, yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
The New York frameworks, I think it's easy, it's
not
called
frameworks,
Engage New, or so one of the programs was called Engage New York, but it's now Eureka, so that might be where the
Okay,
nuance came
and
in.
are they so that's what different
Everybody's
schools?
been piloted, no, they're all piloting each of the programs, so,
But it's all based on the same standards.
Right.
So the
Okay.
programs are different, but the standards are the same.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next steps. All right, I want to look at the budget one last time to show you the impact of grandfathering in terms of what's been budgeted, and I have to hop back on, sorry. Okay, so this is budget. So when we developed the budget. Oh, okay. The internet's just a little slow tonight. There we go. Okay, so in terms of the budget, what we would need to do is put back in $231,000. We could work with that and make that happen. But in order to get the staff equitable, it would be another $82,000. It would also mean that the people that are listed would need a space to work in, and we don't have spaces to really put them. As you know, we're already over at capacity. We already talked about the modulars. Would people like me to revisit that, or do you feel like you have a good understanding of modulars at this point?
Plus or minus like $100,000, it sounds like, though. I mean,
Right.
Yeah,
I think it swings a lot.
That was just what I got for, the monthly cost.
Right.
Yeah.
Not connected to the school, though, is that right?
They can't be because of, the
So-
fire code, I think, so it has to be 10 or so feet back, so from the school, but it would have the stairs. You would have to go outside, you could create an awning, but it wouldn't be attached. I think that's.
I think we might have to bargain.
Deb?
I don't believe those costs either include the benefits given by the town, so there is more impact on the town than just
Right.
that financial number.
Correct. The benefits come from the town side, so we did not build those in. So we would be looking at costs of, if we take Michelle's prices, probably $400,000 to $563,000. On top of that, we would be grandfathering kids in and putting in modulars while we have 4 empty classrooms at Center School. So those are the factors you need to know. So at this point, I open up the discussion for grandfathering. Michelle?
Could I just ask, on the budget
Sure.
part, how is the staff moving in related to, I have been asked questions about the 4.7 FTEs, which I
Right.
don't, fully understand, but how does that come into play on here?
It's 2.7 teachers, a classroom teacher, reading teacher. Then you also have a special education teacher, so I guess it's 3.7 teachers. The assistant principal would need to be put back in, because if we were to redistrict and only leave the 5th grade, then we would put a special ed supervisor in rather than assistant principal, and there's a cost difference there. So we budgeted for a special ed director, supervisor, but we did not budget for an assistant principal. So we would have to add that piece of the budget back in as well. So this list right here gives you what would need to be added back in to get where we were
Right now.
before I developed this year's budget.
Got it,
Okay? And then if you wanted to get to the piece where you're equitable, that you have the same number of staff per children as the other 2 schools, then you would take this next section and have to add that back in. You'd add that on top of what we already had.
Sure.
Alex?
Trying to move us further. One of the things that keeps sticking in my mind is what Ms. Pratt had mentioned about getting 2 classrooms, and trying to see if I could amend my motion and put forward to grandfather 4th graders. And that would be the motion that I would
So
like to
you're
make.
making a motion. So
Yes.
could you repeat that so I can clarify?
Putting forward the motion to grandfather incoming 4th graders.
So the motion is to grandfather incoming 4th graders in addition to the 5th graders.
That's right.
That we already decided. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Who
open-
seconded
We have a
Armin?
motion on the table,
Yeah, we
though.
have a-
we already have a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was my motion.
It was,
Oh, it's your
We
That was
still-
my motion, so I was amending the motion.
Oh, okay.
so your original motion, just so I can,
My original motion was to
The original motion was for grandfather, all,
children.
and siblings.
to only, so now you're.
Or all in
amending-
families, I'm
amending it to
sorry.
only-
Now Alex is amending to motion 4th graders,
Right.
rising 4th graders, because we've already voted on rising 5th graders.
So I guess his motion is to amend his motion to grandfather and 4th graders. I'll keep it simple. Yes, 5th grade's already in, but we don't have to vote on that again. Deb, I'm sorry, do I have a second?
You had Armin's second to motion to amend.
Okay?
So all this vote is that we are agreeing to amend the original motion. Did you
Correct.
want to call Deb?
Yes, but I have a second, so now we can move to discussion. Deb?
I feel like we've already heard from 2 people who asked to discuss the transition for the community before grandfathering was discussed and brought to motion to consider how many more students were going to be able to be added to the current rising 4th graders.
I will
Just for a
entertain
comment.
that as part of this discussion, because some people feel they need that information in order to make an informed vote. So I will ask Donna to present her transition plan at this time.
Okay. So when we're thinking about the transition, and I have 3 different, obviously, stakeholders we have to think of, and the first are students. So we have to think about the students, and then the families, and then also some logistical things. So I want to talk first about placement, because we are going to be welcoming quite a few new students to Center School, so we have to think about placement meetings. So Marie and I brainstormed a couple of ideas, and I talked about it with the staff as well. And our thought is that we need to form placement teams at Blueberry Hill and placement teams at Center School, and we need to get those teams together. And because we've become a very data-driven district, we have a lot of data to look at. And we need to look at what the RTI teams have documented about each one of the students from Blueberry Hill that's coming to Center. And most importantly, we need to hear from the parents of the Blueberry Hill parents of the students. So we are revising our parent input forms. We're in the process of doing that now to make it unique for Blueberry Hill, because our teachers were talking a lot about the placement letter that we use, and we want more information about the students. So that would all become part of the placement team work that we need to do. And starting hopefully sooner rather than later. So placement in place. Then we were looking at a couple of different events for our families. There's many Blueberry families that have never stepped foot into Center School. We need an open house. We need our Blueberry families to come to Center School, tour the school, and have a parent night where they can meet the staff, meet me, and take a look at Center School. So along with a parent night, we would also like a parent-student night. So that's a couple of different evenings that we hope to put into place. So the students can come as well and take a look at the classrooms, again, meet the teachers, and look at their new school. We would like a day visit with the students, and that was done during the last transition 12 years ago. The students were brought over to Blueberry Hill, and we want to roll out the red carpet at Center School. I have to tell you, there's a lot of students who have told me, I've got a friend at Blueberry Hill that might be coming here. And they are excited, there's buzz about it, they're talking about it. So whether we call it a bridge day, I don't know what we call it, but we certainly want to have that day where the Blueberry Hill students with Marie and some representatives from Blueberry Hill come over and visit with us. We talked about really getting our students involved. We have something at Center School called Center School Sightings, and we've already talked about doing something to show to our Blueberry Hill students that highlight some of the traditions at Center so they can take a look at it. You know, we've got a fall carnival, Halloween hustle, things for them to look forward to. Just like there's traditions at Blueberry Hill, there are also traditions at Center and Wool Swamp, and we want them to be able to see what they have to look forward to. We can do that through our technology. Laura Giugio will do a fabulous job, and our fifth graders would like to be involved. We want some fifth grade ambassadors to help out with that. We talked about the students, because we're doing a lot of writing, developing some pen pals right away so we can see those students' names and have at each grade level some welcome letters so that they can, with pictures, and then when they come over to meet the students, they can be with their buddies, Center School buddies. So we want to set up a buddy system. I'm trying to think of, let me make sure I've listed everything here. Way back in April, I had this dated as a completion date. I had task, completion day. I wanted a letter to the community to go out regarding the transition plan. The original date I had that was April 6th. So, you know, I was hoping, but I have to tell you, it never felt that the timing was right. It felt like we had too much discussion to do, a lot of process to go through, and the emotion was really very high, you know, and it just didn't feel appropriate to do it at that time. But I think we need to do that now. I think a letter, you know, once the committee decides what the plan is, just to let the family know that we've been working on this and we've been thinking about this, and we know how important it is to make that transition as smooth as possible for the Blueberry Hills students. So, can you think of it?
No, I think that you
Donna,
covered
we
it.
talked about possibly working with Park and Rec, so having maybe 2 or 3 dances.
Yeah, well,
for-
you know, that was, and we were going back and forth about that. You know, when I talked about, you know, to different things about, you know, we have a dance plan, but then part of me says we would want the Blueberry students to kind of move through the end of the year at Blueberry Hill as well. Yes, have those events to come to Center, but also enjoy the end of the year activities at Blueberry Hill. I don't want to confuse those. So I guess Marie and I would have to brainstorm about that.
I was thinking next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this is probably last on the list, but also very important to me and to my staff and to my maintenance crew. We've started to look at how to move around classrooms. So we've talked about space at Blueberry Hill, and I just want you to know a little bit more about the space at Center School. I think it's important for you to understand that. My math specialist is in a classroom by herself. My reading coach has a classroom by herself individually, and these are full classrooms. Our resource teachers, there are 3 resource teachers in one room, but you need to understand that with the half-day kindergarten in the afternoon, they can use the kindergarten as a learning space. They can go into the math room, they can go into the literacy coach's room for instruction. So I've got these extra learning spaces. I would define them as learning spaces. Also, because Center School was built quite a while ago, as you know, it's a beautiful building. The classrooms are quite large. If you haven't been in the building, they're much larger than Blueberry Hill and Wolf Swamp. So we do have that extra space. If teachers do share a space, there are dividers. With the preschool moving to Wolf Swamp, I do have 4 classrooms that will be empty, but we also have another very large space that I wouldn't use as a classroom, but I could use it as a learning space. Right now it's used for ABA at Center School, and it was originally built, I think, to be 2 separate classrooms. It's a very, so you know, very, very long space, but it's also something that, again, could be used as a learning space. So, I mean, that's separate, but logistically, I've already started to figure out, okay, I have an extra section. I don't want 1 third grade downstairs and 3 upstairs. I need to relocate a lot of classrooms. So that's been part of the plan too, and I've already talked to Mark Gravlin about it, and he unhappily, but he's very cooperative, and he knows that we're going to need some extra help, and arrange that with the town to get us some extra help to get that done. So, and very importantly, I look to Blueberry Hill families to join the committee. You know, we've got this plan on paper. We haven't met because I held off meeting because I want some Blueberry Hill families to join us, so that they can help us. And if there's anything we haven't thought of, we can add it to the list and make sure that it gets done for their children.
Thank you. Are there questions for Donna? Armand?
So Donna, I think it's a great transition plan. I guess the question that has come a couple times is, what's the forethought into the academic impact on the children, and how are we going to address that? The extra adjustment counselors, whatever that plan is.
Well, we're going to be pretty equitable, you know, depending on, you know, what plan the committee decides to put forth. We will not need additional resource help. I mean, we're just, that's not in the plan. We think we're going to be at a very good place to take care of the students. And, you know, to Alex's point about the concerns about the MCAS, 12 years ago, I have to say we were not as data-driven as we are as a district. We were nowhere near where we are at this point. So any student that comes to us, we have so many different benchmarks that we look at academically to make sure that our students are where they need to be and that they're reaching the proficiency we want them to reach. And that's not the only important piece, it's the social emotional too. We're going to be gaining a full-time guidance counselor, which is an addition in the budget. So, you know, she's going to be with us all the time to help us with that social emotional piece for our students.
Adjustment counselor.
Again.
Adjustment counselor, I'm sorry. Adjustment
So much
counselor.
misinformation.
Yes.
I just want to make it clear.
Yeah, sorry, so.
I want to hear that.
Yeah.
Guidance counselor.
Yeah. I misspoke.
Yeah,
so.
no,
A lot of
Yeah.
people
Sorry.
quickly becoming experts on education. I mean, Ms. Hutton, I mean, every parent that I've met that goes to Center School has nothing great to say about Center School. And
Everything.
I was going to say, has nothing bad to say. Has nothing bad to say. I'm sorry. Thanks for that. No, there's nothing bad to say. And in fact, everybody's so happy and actually, in fact, hopes that, you know, some of these Blueberry kids don't invade Center because they like the space there. So it's just a great school. And again, I've always said it, nobody from neighborhood A that I've talked to has said, we don't want to go to Center. We have great schools in this community. And so I just, it's never been a fight between Center and Blueberry. I just want you to understand that, and I think that's a great plan, and I think you put some serious consideration in this, and I think it'll be great. The reason why I sort of had put this motion is because I still feel, and I've been saying this all along, that I see that with my daughter right now, who's 3rd grade going to 4th grade, that there is emotional links happening with, and there is somebody said studies. If you go on Google, there's actually 50-50. People say the kids will be fine, but some say it's not. And it's because of that sort of social capital that kids have invested. When somebody being there for 4 years versus a year, that social capital is different. So that's where I sort of put my motion is to, with grandfathering 4th graders coming, you still have 2 classrooms. That is something that we can still work with, and what Ms. Pratt has said. And so that's where I've said that it doesn't set us anything further back. I know we want to solve the problem, but we're not magicians to make this happen overnight. So that's where my amendment is. And the other thing that I was going to hope is that we would at some point discuss the safety, which was another issue from a broad perspective that I've heard that parents still are a little bit, not with the school, but with Converse and Longmeadow.
I will continue to meet with the chief. We're looking at everything and how many to put on. We've discussed 1 to 3 crossing guards at key places in terms of neighborhood A.
My kids are going to get crossing guards finally. I mean, I go further than most of the folks across the street.
Yeah. So this is very important to us, Alex, as well as you.
So if we could sort of save that discussion for the last, maybe have one more meeting and have the police chief or somebody discuss with the parents, I think that may go a long ways to accommodate, because my discussion with the police has said we don't favor any proposal. It's a political mess that we would like to stay out of it. Safety is our number one priority, and we'll make any plan safe for the children.
I ask you to defer that to me. Crossing guards is a hot topic. The police chief and I have discussed this twice already. There will be more meetings, but I ask that you trust that I will carry through on that. And if there are any questions at all, I will meet with him. I will put out a plan. I'll let you know exactly what we're thinking. He also is aware of construction changes that are coming. We're aware of all that, which is where we've talked about asking the school committee. The school committee is going to actually, I've committed to helping fund this because the state's supposed to be coming with more money. The town manager has committed to giving schools some of that money. So I'm asking school committee to take some of that money and put it toward crossing guards to make sure that that neighborhood is extremely well covered. It came up several times all through this discussion how dangerous Converse and Laurel, but the chief also pointed out 2 other places that we maybe want to put guards in for at least the next 2 to 3 years.
Right, that the cut through happening on Farmington and Ellington is one that it's also on the rise. The other aspect is that I've heard in terms of construction Route 5 is potentially, and again, this is potentially, that kids may be reallocated to walk down Laurel Street.
He brought up the construction. He showed me how he'd have them walk, where he'd place the guards. He's well aware of that, and he has a very crystal clear plan in mind.
The point that I was going to mention on Laurel was, sorry.
No, go finish your thought.
It was just that if that happens, we may be outside of the 2-mile radius.
Well, then there would be 100+ students where I live, which is even further than you, that go to center.
That's
that would
right.
have to be.
It was just surprising to me that
I mean,
that could be something.
That's a whole other.
I am happy, Alex, to have a subcommittee. I would welcome you and Elizabeth to come to meet with the chief with me. You live it, you know that. Elizabeth, would you do that?
Oh, sure. Volunteer again.
Sorry. But I think we can do one meeting. But that way you can make sure that your explicit concerns are answered.
Well, that's been one of the
It doesn't have
loudest
to be a long meeting,
concerns.
but I think parental input would be valued. I don't think the whole group needs to do it, but I would welcome your input on that.
Sure.
If this goes through. Deb?
I was wondering if we could hear from Marie about
grandfathering as far as classes, number of classes that open up that would clear us of possible civil rights violations. What is the minimum number that you realistically think there? Because it can help us decide how many grades are able to be grandfathered, because we certainly don't want to be in a position where we are tempting the federal government to be in our district in a negative way.
So as I said earlier, minimally by 3, 3 to 5 is the range. If I don't get an additional first grade, and because for next year right now I would only have 3 first grades. So if that stayed at 3, I would gain 1 room already. So I would need at least 2 other rooms as a minimum.
Michelle, then Deb.
Oh,
Yeah.
It was just a quick question to
Yeah,
that. So how
okay.
many students, what are we betting on? How many students are we betting on to create
Well, it
that
depends
extra?
if we redistrict or not.
Okay.
So if maybe you
there's
could put
no,
up the chart. Well, again, I would have to look at the chart. If you go to actually the one before it,
Proposal A, which one?
go to either the first slide or the second slide, because that would have the redistricted number. So if we redistrict, it's a really if we redistrict, I'm not worried about my first grade numbers. If we grandfather everybody, then it's a little bit of more of a worry. I actually have already 4 students who have registered for first grade.
Okay.
I will say I don't have a big of a list as I usually have, and I think that's, most of them came to full day K. But, so I don't know about move-ins. That's a unknown factor. I
Marie,
would
the
guess,
motion on the floor is grandfathering fourth grade if
Right.
it's already, so how would that
but I
impact
think that
you?
goes back in, I think they're trying to figure out how many classrooms.
But I think we can, because I was doing
Yes.
that here, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was,
Yeah.
so if we add up the numbers of sections,
Right.
are we roughly looking at the number of classrooms?
Correct.
So if we go back, well, I'm sorry, up one slide to the previous
Yep.
slide, where we just grandfathered fifth grade. I'm exhausted at this point, but if my
10,
math is
14.
right, that's 22 classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody.
Yes,
everybody
you are
can
correct.
check me?
I did that math earlier.
And so then if we grandfather fourth and fifth, this is already 23 classrooms,
Correct.
and then we stay at 23 for the next, so there's no classroom difference if we grandfather third, fourth, and fifth. So if we total up the classrooms on the next slide, that's also 23.
Correct.
And then if we grandfather second, third, fourth, and fifth, we need an additional classroom, we're up to 24.
Mm-hmm.
And we stay at 24 if we grandfather everyone. There's no classroom difference in the last three options, if my math is right.
Correct.
Sherry?
I would just like to point out some obvious things that you can look at the numbers. If we grandfather fourth and fifth, we still have 80 more kids at Blueberry than we do at Center. And, 85 more, 79 more and 85 more than we do at Wolf Swamp. Still not equity among the schools. That means the staff at Blueberry, the wear and tear on the building is still 80 more kids. I think that is the biggest thing. Next, fourth grade is the largest class at Blueberry that would be remaining. We have 100 third graders to the comparable 59 at Center School. That means 100 MCAS scores, 100 everything has to be done for third graders now that only 59 are done at Center. I'm only picking on you because I know your numbers. But that to me is completely inequitable, whereas we would move 20 from Proposal A over to Center and make it completely equitable. The next thing to factor in is if you keep the fourth graders at Blueberry, then that's 2 years that parents have split kids. If you have a current third grader and a first, second kindergartner, now you're gonna have 2 drop-offs and pickups at Blueberry and Center for 2 years, whereas you're only gonna do it for 1 year if you just have a fifth grader. Next, I feel like the fourth graders are also, that's really when you can start letting your kids ride their bikes on their own or ride with the neighbor kid who's in third grade, whatever. Those, to me, that neighborhood's gonna need those leaders to ride the bikes or walk with the kids all the way to Center like they do all the way to Blueberry. I think that, I know we keep bringing up how difficult this will be socially for these kids. Now that we've grandfathered the fifth graders, I believe there's only 70 kids, someone could tell me, going from Proposal A if we keep the fourth graders there. Not all 70 of those kids are gonna have emotional issues. I would bet less than 5 are gonna have emotional issues transitioning. I think, and I have nothing but parental experience, that most kids are going to be fine. They have wonderful staff they're coming from, wonderful staff they're going to, and wonderful parents who will help them make this transition. I think that for the benefit of the town, for the benefit of all of us sitting here, I am against keeping the fourth graders at Blueberry.
Alex?
See, throughout this process, the thing that's bothered me the most is that children will be paying the price. Children will be paying the price for inactivity for somebody who should have started this process before. Children who are not guilty at all in this process, they're being moved from one school to the other. That's the biggest problem, that they need to now be readjusting because somebody failed in the educational process for them. They are not guilty, and they shouldn't be guilty. They shouldn't be the victims. Second, once you start redistricting, there will be people who will voluntarily move. But to your point, Sherry, if I have a first grader and fourth grader, and if I don't feel like it's important to me, I'm gonna switch to center right away. So you have to understand that there's gonna be that effect, that people will, even if they're grandfathered, doesn't mean they will stay. People will move to say, to hell with it, I'm not fighting two car lines. My child is resilient. And to your point of 5 out of 70, I'm not so sure, because on average, 20% receive special services in Blueberry Hill. That's the sort of the number. So there is a good number that of students that have been used to that environment that now will have to readjust to a new environment that already have difficulties. And then you may add to the number. 20% of 70 is 14 kids, 15 kids, and you may have some additional ones. So these are numbers that we can't just throw out and say it's going to be 2 or 5.
Okay. Deb, Katie, Carol?
I would just remind everybody that we did hear from some people at the forum, and they were students who were redistricted, and they felt like their experiences were good. And I feel like what we didn't see come forward, and Longmeadow is famous for people returning because they love their town and they love to live here, and we all know a lot of families that have returned to raise their families here. I feel like a lot of those who have returned have lived through situations like that and gone through it in the school system. And what we didn't see was a show of people come and say, I had a negative experience. Instead, we saw, I think, three come forward and say they had a good experience in their transition and being moved.
Okay. Kate, Carol, and then Alex. Kate?
Alex, I think that by leaving kids at Blueberry in the situation that we're at right now, we're making all of them pay for an overcrowded situation. And you can go back and try and say, we should have started, but that doesn't change where these kids are now, and they don't have equitable access to service. And I feel like that's making the entire community at Blueberry pay for it, in your words. Like that, it's not about singling out any group of kids and trying to in some way make them suffer or make them pay the price. This is really about balancing the schools. It's not easy to do. It's not an easy thing to have to do, but it's the right thing to do for all of these kids. It just is. Even the kids who are moving.
Carolyn?
I was just going to
And
echo that,
Jenna
so.
and Alex.
I just have more of a, sorry, you guys.
No, go ahead.
done? I just have more of a statement, I guess, at this point. I would just like to say, I get what you're saying. People stood up there, I think your son was one of them, Sherry, 3, 4, however many, teenagers stood up there and, said that they were perfectly fine. And, I get that. Chances are most of the kids or, majority of kids will be fine. But you can't base your opinion off of, a few people that stood up there and said they were okay. And I just do have to echo, 200-something plus individuals Tuesday night who voiced their opinion, and we've been saying all along, the public's opinion counts. The public's opinion counts. I've heard that numerous times. And just for the record, 240 some odd people were kind of saying their voices don't count. So I just had to get that out there.
Alex?
Yeah. What I counted was
Sherry's
2 students. One was Sherry's son, who was redistricted when he was in kindergarten. And we had Laura, who was an adult, who was redistricted at 4th, and she said her experience was terrible. That's what I counted. One good
What's her face?
kindergarten.
Jess Hutchins said it was great.
Right, Jess
that
Hutchins
other Laura
spoke.
lady
And,
stood up and said it was great.
those 2 that talked about it, they said that the process was a whole year of them going to school and being prepared and knowing what's going on, what's happening, which, again, is something that's very much failing this time around. Not children having the time to be aware of that. It's a sort of a sudden move this time.
Sherry, then Susan?
I just want to say that, first of all, my son went up unprompted. I didn't know he was going to the meeting until like 20 minutes before. He did that all on his own, so didn't get from me. I lived in the proposal A district. It's a very tight-knit neighborhood. It's a wonderful neighborhood. And I can tell you, because it was, we're getting redistricted, I don't remember anyone, and very tight-knit. I would say I know most of the families who had kids at that time. No one said after a couple days, oh, still having a really hard time. They really miss center school. No one said that about their child. So even though these families are in favor of grandfathering, that's not fair to the other, 430 kids at Blueberry, and it's not equitable. It's not good for education. And you're right, Alex, you can go back and say all you want about how this process has been terrible. It's been unfair that it didn't start sooner. But I'd like to fix this problem tonight if we can, and move forward to bringing the new students to center.
Susan?
Sherry kind of answered my question, but I know Marie was here when we last time.
Yes, it was my first year as principal when I received.
You received the kids,
the
so I
center
just,
student,
I,
yes.
I just want to, maybe, can you talk about how that went?
It went great. I mean, Sherry was one of them. We had done similar things the spring before, and it was just the spring before. My understanding of my recollection is the timeline was different, as we all know. The decision was made, I believe, in March. And then that's when we started doing the transitions. No, I mean, I think it was well thought out, and I don't remember. I was a brand new principal, so it was exciting. It was a brand new building, so it was just it was exciting. I mean, that's what I remember about the first couple of days of school, it was exciting. So.
Deb?
I think we also have to assume and have a little more faith in the administration that the children are coming from and going to. That if there is some extreme situation where there is extreme emotional distress or other things or special services of extreme need, that those will not be ignored.
If you just said something.
Because they're not insensitive leaders, they're professional educators, and they've been trained in these areas, and I think it's difficult to hand trust over in that way, but I think we hire them to be at the quality they are so that we can put our faith in them to make sure all students, and as Mrs. Hutton mentioned, she would be looking to have consultation with the other school to discuss all the students, all the data, their whole being, their whole person. And I think I understand why, but there's obviously going to be some lack of faith in that, as you don't know the administration you're going to. But there has to be some trust in the community that they are going to a good place, and there are going to be, here and there, some exceptions to the rule that are going to have to be dealt with, and they will be dealt with professionally.
Alex, then Caroline.
I guess, it's okay, sure. We can make and find arguments that it's okay to redistrict, but I'm just gonna look around the room and ask which one of you would be great if their children would be redistricted. I mean, you're saying this because you're not impacted, but if you really was looking and facing children, some of you, I mean, if you're really facing with this situation, I wouldn't be fighting so hard. And you saw those people, 150 people who are, almost ready to cry during that. So I think that's the whole concept here, is that sometimes it's easier to justify if it's not happening to you. My point is, let's minimize this pain to as many kids as we don't have to, because if we all about room, let's not even grandfather fifth graders, and let's just move everybody. But at some point, we need to find some sort of a balance, and that's all.
Carolyn, then Deb, then Tom.
So at the forum, I think we all agree that overwhelmingly people said E was a bad idea. Great. Then I think the next biggest comment that we heard was about grandfathering. Everybody wanted grandfather, everybody. We heard it over and over. However, I would guarantee that most of those people had not looked at the numbers. They didn't have, whether they didn't have it available to them or they hadn't done the research, they didn't see the numbers. And our number one priority that we have as a committee here, our job is to look at this objectively. Our number one, what we chose as our number one priority here was to rebalance all the three schools. And if we're going to do that, grandfathering all kids, it doesn't work. Those two things don't go together.
Okay. Deb?
I think it'd be great to hear some numbers from, if Marie has any more, or if you have ideas about what would be equitable education with the numbers as far as grandfathering, because I think there's got to be some balance there, and I think that's what we all want to know about.
That ties into the comment I was going to make. part of what's frustrating for me is that this is our last big decision, and we've been hearing for the first time at this meeting about potential civil rights violations. I don't recall that coming up at previous meetings.
It just came out in the newspaper last week.
And if what I heard was correct, in order to become compliant, we need to pick up a minimum of 2 more rooms in addition to the room that we expect to be free by this graduating class. That handcuffs us into only 5th grade being grandfathered. And I'm extremely disappointed by that, but that's the only way we seem to be able to remain compliant. And am I mistaken in that interpretation? And please, someone tell me that I am. So we're in a box.
Good, call the vote.
Deb?
Marie, can you confirm that?
I can't. My brain, it's been a very long week. Those numbers are just right now, I'm having a hard time computing those numbers. So I can't, I don't want to give the wrong information.
Alex?
Someone else?
I mean,
Yeah.
at this point, I would withdraw my motion and just, we have to make a decision during the next meeting is the final decision, since we already have that was what decided last time, and we have a couple of members that were not here. A couple of members, like Jenna, had to change her flight. Her family's in Florida right now, and she had to pay extra fees so she can be here tonight. So this matters a lot to a lot of people, and we had sort of said that this will not be our final decision. So at this point, I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Deb?
Is there anyone else here from Blueberry District that can confirm what you're saying? As far as numbers of classrooms, that would be the only option as far as meeting the civil rights?
I'm a Blueberry parent. I'm just going off the totals
Right.
of sections.
I just don't know who represents everyone, because I came new tonight. I'm just wondering if someone else from Blueberry, because it is effective school, can
Right.
confirm if what you're saying is accurate.
I'm a Blueberry parent and a school council rep, but I'm only totaling the numbers on the charts. that
To
we
me, that
have
sounds
today.
like maybe Marie needs more time.
The charts are accurate, but I think,
So
Yeah, I
the
don't have my
question is,
map
how
here,
many,
Marie.
how many
Right.
classroom more, I think, do you need in order to have 2 special ed teachers? per
I already
class?
said that. That I said,
2 classes.
Yeah.
2 to 3, depending on what happens in
Right.
1st grade. So 2 to 3 is what I said. That I don't
So
definitely know.
that's the same question.
So if
Yeah.
my math was correct, then we go from 24 to 22. 24 is with full grandfathering, 22 is with only 5th grade.
Correct,
As soon as we grandfather 4th grade, we're already up to 23 sections.
correct.
We've lost a classroom. Now we're down to 2, the one we're picking up by 5th grade graduating, and only 1 more. That seems to be no wiggle room.
What the year after before?
So knowing that, I
What about the
move
year after?
that we go forward with proposal A and continue with grandfathering only 5th grade students.
we would need a motion first to,
He did rescind. No,
no,
we don't need a
we have the
motion.
motion from last meeting that we would not make a final
Oh, so-
determination this evening.
I move that we rescind, can I make that motion,
Yes.
even though I didn't make the original motion?
Yes.
You
I
can.
can't.
Mhm.
So I
Michelle
move that we
can withdraw
rescind
hers.
the original vote or motion to not take vote tonight.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. Any discussion? Tom?
Again, I'll repeat that I want to get this decision right. I think that there are other options that could potentially be explored. We need to now free up 1 extra classroom. We might be able to be creative. We might be able to reach out to the community as a whole for ideas. And I would hope that we could make this final decision at a follow-up meeting when we've had a little bit more time to think about it, hear from the community, and brainstorm a bit more.
Okay. Alex?
And I'll also form a formal protest the way the committee has been set up tonight. I feel like that was not how things were set up, and we are sort of working along as things have been eliminated. That's how things should have also progressed on the committee. So I want that to be put in the record.
Okay. Duly noted.
Just for a
Dawn?
point of clarification, Marie, some of your teachers are in storage spaces. So when you think of grandfathering in the 5th grade, what does that do to those spaces? I mean, I'm just thinking of those spaces.
Those spaces
I
are
think
still being used
they
as
will,
they currently
and they
being
will
used.
still
Yes.
need to be used.
Those rooms that I've mentioned is really to those people who are sharing rooms, to get them down to 2 people.
So we have a motion on the floor to rescind the vote that we don't vote tonight. I have that seconded, and we've had discussion around that. Is there any other discussion? So let's take a vote. All in favor of rescinding the vote not to vote tonight? Four. All in favor of holding, of
All opposed.
All opposed.
All
That's-
opposed.
Okay. Abstentions? Okay, 2 abstentions. Okay. So the noes have it? What's the
So
count?
we have 7:15, so 8 out of 15.
Said
So
no.
it- So 8 out of 15 said no.
The motion fails.
So the motion fails. Okay,
So we will not be voting on a final proposal this evening.
correct.
Is what we voted.
Correct. So at this point, I think we should look at with the next steps in the next meeting date. We did set up a meeting date previously. Let me go back to the agenda where I have them listed.
April 29th, I thought? Does that?
28th, I have. Well, I think
That's
it was the
29th.
They're on the
29th.
agenda, all I have to do is look. It was April 29th.
29th, Wednesday.
29th.
So we can mark that. I skipped one thing that we need to talk about, so our next steps. What are, Michelle?
Just before we get there, I had a couple more very quick questions. Marie, how many students are currently, and I know it's somewhere, but can you just answer it for me?
Maybe.
I know, I'm so confused by all these charts. How many currently are in first grade that, so when you said you don't know if you'll have 3 sections or 4 sections?
So it's actually your question is how many really are in kindergarten?
Okay,
So right now I have 58 kindergarten students.
Okay.
That would be moving up to first grade. And currently I have 4 new students who have actually registered.
okay.
So now I'm in the 60s and I have 3, so that would be 63 divided by 3 is 21 students in the class. That's why I'm worried about that number if we don't redistrict, because that's, right now, that's not counting some move-ins.
Right.
And I have to say of any grade, any grades, K and 1 are the ones that we have really tried to keep low. So, yeah.
So if I was a betting person, I'd say we're pretty close to 4 sections for that.
Mhm.
I don't want to put, okay.
No, but that, I mean, it's a number that we would be watching, for sure.
Sounds close.
Yeah.
It's close, okay. And then the other question that I just haven't gotten out of, can you confirm that that the staff, and I know it's again somewhere, but that the staff is moving from Blueberry to Center or somehow so that Center's classes will be as small as they currently are? I know it's somewhere, but
Yes,
can you,
yes.
so you're accommodating so that their classes don't
Absolutely.
increase? And,
Yep.
okay, thank you. Those were the 2 questions. And then before we close, Marie, I just wanted to thank you for everything you did on the night of the forum. I think that was a really difficult night. I cannot commend you enough for getting the moderator. I think that was probably, I don't know what the cost was or the investment was, but I think it was really fantastic. I want to thank you for being honest about my involvement on the committee. I really appreciate that. I know I've beat this to a dead horse, but I care very much about the work I do and want for my own involvement to be documented correctly. And utmost, I want to thank you for the grace that you showed in apologizing to the community for everything. I think firsthand, it's really difficult to say that you made a mistake, and I need to say that we're all only human and we make many mistakes all the time. And your job, I would make many daily, and I want to recognize that. I know you're working really hard. You email me, you text me, weekends, holidays, vacations, and I do want to recognize that. I know you're doing the best that you can, and thank you for leading the community on Tuesday to a positive forum.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Michael?
I think some information that would be helpful to me and probably to others in the community moving forward in anticipation of the 29th would be some public disclosure. I mean, I know that the information's out there, but perhaps in a place on the website where we can find the name of the specialized programs at each school, the numbers of students who participate in those specialized programs, and I know that Sue probably has that information. I'd also ask that you consider polling the community, specifically those people affected by A, about whether they would voluntarily opt to go to center. And I know that there was a show of hands in this group, and this is a very small group, but it might help anticipate what could be a possible solution in terms of when you look at whether you grandfather all of Blueberry, some of Blueberry, or none of Blueberry, if you knew what grade level, how many siblings, and whether any families would say, I'd be willing to do this on their own. And I don't want to suggest that as a possibility, but it might solve some of the
first meeting. That's what
You've been saying it over and over. I'll vouch for that.
some of the anxiety that some people have about it, and obviously knowing that it's simply people's opinions and they're not bound to it, but might give you an idea.
Marie, did you say that you tried that once?
Yes.
Michael, one
Did
thing,
it work?
and I understand where you're coming from, but we're going into break week, and then we're meeting right after break, so I'm not sure about polling and participation from neighbors.
Sure.
Just a comment.
Absolutely.
And I want to just,
Understood.
somebody asked, Marie said she did this previously and it didn't work.
Several years ago, we had 3 grade levels that my numbers were much higher, so we sent it out they could go to either school. One student ended up going to Will Swamp and 2 students ended up going to Center.
It's a different situation. Though.
It is a difference. I would
that was
agree with
sort
you.
of Everybody's staying at one school as opposed to the neighborhood, and we're trying to figure out who is willing to move ahead with it versus everybody's staying and we're actually literally picking people out, or they're self-choosing out. It's very different.
I guess my fear is if we surveyed and people said yes and then didn't go. And we built.
I mean, but it's,
Okay.
to your point now, is redistricting is a reality, so people will be a
Right.
lot more sort of certain which way they want to go. If you're not forced to redistrict, most would say, don't break, it's not broken for me, don't fix it.
Okay. Deb, Michelle, okay, Deb?
Clearly, it's very serious that some families won't want to go, or they'll want more of the siblings grandfathered in, and some might be willing to go. So if there's any chance that a family might want to go with 3 children and they're fine with it, that might free up a spot for somebody else to stay that really, it feels like it's important to them. And since this is so emotional for the people going forward, I would hope we could pursue that option. And if perhaps we were to get some paperwork back on that and then want to go back and ask those families who thought they might, if they would be willing to commit to that, then we would know for sure numbers to move forward with.
Okay, so I guess I would need more input from you on what information you're looking for. So are we asking rising 3rd graders, those going to 4th grade?
I would ask every family in
Yeah.
neighborhood,
Every
in Plan
family.
A, whether or not, given the fact that at this point there are no other options on the table, would you be willing next year, regardless of yours child's grade, because I do know of some families with 5th graders or rising
I would agree with
who have offered to move.
Correct.
So I think that there are people who would be willing to, or not, I shouldn't say, I don't know that. I think it would be a way to gauge all families on their willingness to move or not. And it would be just a simple gauge. From that, what Deb is suggesting is then those who say yes to go back and ask them to commit to that, and then we'd have some firm numbers that we could move forward with.
Especially when it's most likely that any incoming new neighbors would be
going,
redistricted.
right.
I
The
think
neighborhood
that's
has
the
moved.
caveat that, right.
Okay. So I will poll all families in neighborhood A. I'm going to ask how many children they have, what grades they're in right now, so we can track this. And would they be willing to go to Central School voluntarily? Or would they stay at Blueberry? Tom?
I would ask that the wording be very carefully crafted so that it's clear that this is for informational purposes only. I would hate for any family to get the idea that they are making a choice that will be binding, only to find out that they are in fact moved in the end. So I would just ask that it's very clear in the phrasing that.
Excellent point. Alex?
I was just gonna volunteer Tom and Libby to help you with the wording.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'd like to get this out sooner than later because Janet's right and family's going away, so hate to rush you again.
Can I just
But
say-
if you two want to help, just give me tomorrow night or evening that you can meet.
We should be
Yeah.
able to do electronic.
Full circle back to the open meeting law, would that have to be an open
No,
meeting? or is
no.
that something?
No,
okay,
we're okay. So,
Can we open
Katie?
that up to the larger Blueberry community, if anybody, even if you're not in neighborhood A, if you'd be, is this something that you would be?
I would be hesitant of opening that door again. We've
Mhm.
closed it,
Mhm.
and any inkling.
No, I mean, like, just for families, like, this is an option, if you live within the circle of the 2 mile, just.
Gets a little, it
But
gets
I mean,
confusing.
but this is also a good test to see how many people would be interested to move, given that there is so many big classrooms in center and a great environment.
So I was, I'm sorry, were you going to?
Jenna?
What I was gonna say was, I was actually had a similar idea to Katie, because I know a few of I went through every email and that's come into the database and, writing them on my list and my tick sheets and everything. And I do know that there was at least 2, I don't remember the individuals' names, but I think they were like incoming kindergartners or incoming first graders, and they were, I think in like the Elizabeth Park area or whatever, and they had said, we would voluntarily go to center. It is so close for us.
Well, if you're going to do
So-
that, you can open up Wolf Swamp too.
I
Janet?
think that at this point, with the committee having worked through the pain of getting to here where we are tonight, with coming to a decision of one neighborhood, that opening it up to the larger community as a whole is going to open a can of worms that I don't think we necessarily want to explore, especially if we're looking to bring this to a conclusion, and cause less pain.
I'd agree, because we also heard in the forum how important neighborhoods were, and if we're going to move it to a larger whole. The other thing that the chief was concerned about was having isolated children going different ways to schools. He felt it was important that the neighborhoods did stay together, so. All right, any other discussion or next steps? And we can talk offline as soon as this is done.
I will offer that next steps. I will go through each, I have a map of the school that's by sitting on my desk, and I can go through each grandfather and what rooms, so that it's very clear by what grade, what rooms I get.
Okay,
Make a motion to adjourn.
all in favor?
Who seconded?
Tom?
Thank you.
I didn't even do discussion. I just want to say thank you very much. This has been really, really tough, and this is a wonderful community. I tell people all the time how proud I am to work here, and this again proves it when people can come to the table and make these decisions together. So thank you.
Keeping the next meeting that was on the calendar.
The 29th. So.
Is it here?
It will be here. We'll tell